6-month negotiation between the two parties.
The decision was obviously not an easy one, but without question, this was the right choice for our nation's future.
And in this week's science news, a distant planet is terrified that it might be able to someday support human life. In other news, a live cow is lowered onto the floor of the U.S. House of Representatives. The majority of an office's supplies are used to apply for different jobs, and a lapsed cult member only attends sanctum on major bloodletting holidays.
This is the Onion News Network.
Don't miss a moment of Free Talk Live. Get our archives daily via our podcast at feeds.freetalklive.com. Free Talk Live.
It's Free Talk Live. Welcome to the program here. Phones are open and you can join us here. The number is 603-283-6160. That's 603-283-6160. Coming up, the survey is in from Gallup, and it shows that Americans this year consider the government to be the number one problem in America.
All Americans?
Well, no, but overall, the largest group of people responding to Gallup's latest poll named the government / poor leadership as the number one most important problem
I just meant like
in the
it's,
U.S.
I don't know. It's not just some group of like a college students or something. I don't know, something like that.
No, this is, I believe, of all Americans, at least of those who were polled.
But they're missing the point. You shouldn't go to the government if you want good leadership. If you want good leadership, go to your priest or a pastor or a community leader or something like that. Government, they're rulers. They're not leaders. And there's this huge difference between the two. Citing that the government is a problem because we have terrible leaders, that's like saying the police are a problem because they have terrible hot dogs for sale. Okay, well, these are fundamentally different things. If you go to the police station expecting to buy hot dogs, you're going to have a bad time. And if you go to the government expecting good leadership, you're also going to have a bad time.
You tell them when you want to buy bacon, they're going to shoot you.
It is something affecting both Republicans and Democrats. We can talk about the details of this poll coming up here in moments. But first, I want to get into where you and I went today, Bonnie, along with, I would say, according to Chris Wade, who counted over 40 people who attended what was essentially the sentencing hearing. I mean, it's a civil case, so it's library, the cryptocurrency corporation that has created the library protocol, the token, the whole
platform
thing.
that allows you to share media content and just all sorts of content online for free in a torrented, decentralized way. It's a gift to humanity.
Yeah, it's been a really great piece of software. The protocol is the library media sharing protocol, and as you said, it allows you to share media, including video, including audio, including PDF files, including pretty much anything I think that you want to upload.
Yeah, and it's immune to censorship. That's its biggest feature. It's not just resistant to censorship in the way that like Gap or Parler or whatever is. It's completely immune. You have to take out the entire library network if you want to censor something from library.
I use Odyssey, which is the library uses the library protocol. I think is the way that they like to say it. Mm-hmm. And I watch David Icke videos on there all the time that you can't get on YouTube or even when you just Google them.
Yeah. There's a lot of stuff you can find on Odyssey that you can't find anywhere else. But Odyssey's a separate kind of animal to some extent, and that came up in the hearing today. I want to get into that because that was really like an important part of this hearing today. But the hearing today was I use the term sentencing, but that's not exactly the right term. Sentencing happens at a criminal trial. It's the
punishment phase, though, right?
This is the civil equivalent of it. It is what they call the settlement. Which is sort of a settlement's got a kind of a misleading connotation to it. When you settle a case, generally it's something you do before a verdict happens, right? Like a settlement. It's generally
by agreement, right?
Right, yeah. Settlement is usually like, okay, the parties agree to settle prior to going to actually having to spend the money to go to trial. It saves money on both sides because you don't have to pay the attorneys to go through a whole trial. So they've been through the trial. That happened.
Well, sort of, right? the judge opted to not give them a trial, if
That's
I recall
correct.
correctly, and he was like, "Nope, you're guilty. I'm going to declare that you're guilty."
Yeah, it was some sort of declarative judgment or something like that. I'm not sure what the exact terminology was, but
Which means that they did not, in fact, get to exercise their right to a trial. They were, in fact, denied their right to a trial.
well, the statement was, and I forget who told me this after the hearing today, but somebody said the reason why there was no trial was because both sides agreed on the facts. And a jury would be a group of people that has to judge facts, not the law. And so since both sides agreed to the facts of the case, it was only a question of law. And so therefore, it would not have made any sense to go to a jury trial because they don't get to judge the law. And
I mean,
so,
that's true if you set up a Monopoly game where the bankers are ultimately the ones who set all the rules and to determine what is and isn't against the rules, which is what we have here. Jury nullification would be an important aspect of this. But if you go into it assuming that the jury cannot say, no, library did nothing wrong, case dismissed, then you just start from square one where they're already guilty.
That's
you
a good
have to
point.
have jury nullification on the table.
yeah,
Right.
you're right
And
about
it was
that.
Chris that told you that, and he went to the last hearing, so it's pretty legit probably about what they discussed.
Yeah, it sounds like the American legal system. So I believe it.
So the library had, as you pointed out, this uncensorable, still does. Library is as a protocol, which is just a software essentially, or a series of commands out there that anyone can utilize in order to create a platform.
You could
on
write
top
your
of that
own
protocol.
software that uses
Correct.
the library protocol.
Correct. So
I don't know why you'd want to, but you could.
yeah, well, because the existing software is pretty good and it does what it says it's going to do, and that's of course why they've been going after libraries, because it is a threat to the status quo of centralized platforms like YouTube, giving them competition without having the same megatech corporation level business behind it. Library is a much smaller business. They started out by what they call doing a pre-mine, which means that, as I understand it, in the world of cryptocurrency, when they were launching the library blockchain, they mined it themselves first for a while. They didn't let anybody else in.
So did Satoshi Nakamoto. I mean,
did he?
Strictly speaking, like the first 80 blocks were mined by Satoshi or something.
Yeah, but
to
that's
that
probably
effect.
just because no one else had gotten their miner together to do it. I don't know if there's really like a pre-mine.
I don't think I would call
with
Bitcoin pre-mined like
Yeah.
that, but like it's effectively the same.
I mean, as I understand it, he put it out there when the network went live.
And I
So-
don't understand why they would have to prove. I'm sure there's some insane technical reason, but it seems like they could just create a wallet and just give themselves 80,000 or 800,000 library tokens if that was what they want to do, instead of going through the process of actually pre-mining it. But I don't know.
how all that works, but in this case, if you're the only miner, then you get all the blocks, right? So that's just sort of the way that pre-mines are done. For listeners that don't know, when you're mining cryptocurrency, you're in competition generally with every other miner that's out there, and only one miner is going to quote unquote mine the block. They're the one that will find the block. They're going to mine that block, and the block, for listeners that don't know, is a block of transactions, and that block of that data goes onto the blockchain, which is this sort of uninterrupted chronological list of transactions, or a ledger, if you will, of transactions that started at the very beginning and goes up to right now.
And it has a math question associated with it, and the miners are all basically all day working on trying to solve the question, and whoever gets the answer first gets the
Right. So if
Money.
you're
It's
the
like
only miner, you're going to get all the answers.
Yeah.
You're going to be the one.
It's like a bus where like you don't want just one person on the bus, because that's just a tremendous waste of money. So you don't want just one transaction in the block or one person in the bus, so to speak. You want to wait until it's got enough people on it that it's worthwhile to drive the bus to point B. And the same is true in these blocks. That's why they do blocks instead of per transaction. You save up enough blocks, you get enough people on the bus, and then suddenly it makes sense for the bus to travel to point B. So ideally, there should be some sort of balance between, okay, we need enough people on the bus to make this worth our while, but we also don't need so many that we're just sitting here waiting forever, and then the bus never actually departs because we're trying to cram 500 people on the bus, and there's just not that many who want to go.
Right.
Is the reason why that they would pre-mine possibly, this is just me speculating, is it possibly because they wanted to make sure that everything was working before they put it out to the public or something?
That's a valid hypothesis.
I mean, it could be. Look, I don't think there's anything wrong with a pre-mine.
No, I don't think there's
they were-
anything wrong with it. I'm just
Right, but there's a lot
wondering
of people out there who say, "Whoa, pre-mine, oh, is it bad?"
If they were
I didn't
upfront
even
about
know.
it, who cares?
Yeah,
Yeah.
They were, from all that I could tell. It's like, look, y'all created this. You get first dibs. You can get your pre-mine in. That's totally fine.
And
There's nothing wrong with that.
And there should be some sort of incentive for people who develop new technologies and cryptocurrencies to
Right.
get something out of it.
Right, and
And
so
the judge also said today, like, they were out on Front Street with everything they did.
he did say that the judge in this particular case, is obviously not a good person because he ruled against library.
Who
right?
was the judge?
Barbadoro is his name. He's the
Okay.
same guy that put Chris Cantwell in prison for no reason. So this guy, made himself look like he was being really fair today.
Lots of bureaucrat laughing, which is my least favorite thing on earth.
What about a bureaucrat laughing? I didn't catch that.
There was just lots of bureaucrat laughing today. Like, he'd be like, oh, well, I see the blah, 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 this technical, ho, 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 ho. And then, like, the crowd would laugh with him, and I was not laughing. It's like, well, you don't laugh with a stupid bureaucrat that's ruining someone's life and having fun doing it.
Yeah, ruining someone's life is exactly right. I'm sure Jeremy Kauffman, the CEO of Library, I believe, will be fine. I mean, his life won't be ruined, but they are destroying
his business is not going to be fine.
No, they're destroying the thing that he created.
That's right.
And that's devastating whether he survives and recovers or not.
He looked really sad today. I felt bad for him. Also, he, like, turned completely red at one point. He was, like, really upset about something that was going on, something that the SEC was lying about his business. So he went up to his lawyers and was like, trying to explain this to them, and he was like, oh, he looked so mad. I felt really bad for him.
I'm sorry to hear it.
Yeah. So the hearing today was what they called the settlement phase or the penalty phase or whatever. And so in this case, they had three things that they needed to go through. One was the SEC was requesting an injunction. And this was a big chunk of the day today. And it was about almost a 2-hour-long hearing. The SEC wants to enjoin or have an injunction issued against not just Library, which, of course, as the judge pointed out, is no longer going to exist, the company. Library, the software, Library is open source. There's no way to stop it. The blockchain exists all around the planet, so that's not going away.
Now it needs a DAO, though, in order to survive, I would imagine.
Yeah, and I didn't have a chance to ask Jeremy about what the potential future would be, and he may not want to talk about it quite yet.
And I think that they're going to tell him he can't do anything like that, right?
I don't know if he personally would be prohibited from continuing to work on the software. It's just Library as a company can no longer exist. And Library as a company is going to be subject to what is called a disgorgement, which
horrible word
I believe just
today.
means we're going to pull from you all that we possibly can. Whatever life possibly lives in this company will be disgorged into the government. Now, there's not much left because Library, as was pointed out in their one of their court filings recently, is bankrupt. They have no money left. They have no
they didn't
employees.
file bankruptcy yet.
No, they haven't
But
yet.
they said they were quote unquote broke.
Yeah.
Well, you only file bankruptcy if you have debtors and debts that you cannot pay, right?
Yes.
You don't file it just because you're broke.
That's
and as
true.
I understand it with Library, the only debtor they had that they may not be able to pay would
Odyssey.
be the U.S. government. Oh, or Odyssey.
Because they loaned money to Odyssey when Odyssey got started. Now, of course, there's no chance they're going to pay that back to Odyssey, and Odyssey itself is
Wait,
also...
Odyssey loaned money to them?
No, Library owned money to loaned money to Odyssey.
So in theory, Odyssey may or may not be required to pay that back. I don't know, and it's up to, Jeremy Kauffman or the CEO or whatever it is at Library could probably say, look, we forgive that debt. You don't owe that to us.
Right. Now, what is that going to mean for the federal government? I don't know. There's still...
I was going to say, I think the SEC was trying to argue today, I don't know for sure, but I think they were trying to argue that would be ill-gotten funds. So it would be ill-gotten, so the Library or Odyssey couldn't keep it.
Yeah, basically the SEC is trying to go after Odyssey at this point. They see them as a quote-unquote successor to Library, even though they're not.
That's fundamentally not true. I mean, it's a spawn of Library, certainly, and more like a child than a successor. It's not like a direct product of Library. The two are completely distinct entities. One is a web front that accesses the Library protocol. One is an organization that created the Library protocol and the Library program that uses said protocol.
Yeah, and that's basically part of the argument from LBRY's side was, yeah, Odyssey did start as, under the auspices of LBRY, but LBRY cut it loose during the summer of 2021. They had some of their employees go over to Odyssey, but the employees that are at Odyssey aren't working on the LBRY protocol. They're working on Odyssey-related things.
Right.
And Odyssey, while it can interface with LBRY, the protocol, it is not the primary way. Now, they didn't make this point real heavy during this hearing, but Odyssey, when you call up a video from Odyssey, it's not coming in on the LBRY protocol because it's too slow. The LBRY protocol is the backup. So Odyssey has its content on Content Delivery Network servers. This is what Jeremy Kauffman said in a statement last year. Odyssey is not a 100% blockchain operation. Odyssey takes money in dollars. When you do a subscription on Odyssey for $3 a month or whatever it is, that's coming in dollars through the Stripe credit card charging platform. So Odyssey tipping, that's in dollars. There are LBRY tokens that you can still send to people. Those do exist on the Odyssey platform, but it is not the front and center. It is not being used for some sort of investment purposes. It's not being used as a quote-unquote security in any way, shape, or form. And they don't need LBRY. It could be, correct. This is another thing the judge even said he understood already, that it could, in theory, be run on any other protocol or blockchain. He did acknowledge that, yeah. So the judge, to his credit, seems to be somewhat cognizant of how blockchain and these things are working, like way more so than the judge in the Crypto 6 case was. This guy seems to have studied it to some extent. Of course, that's what this case is all about. He had to, right? Right, is how blockchain functions. That's what our case was all about, too. He just doesn't care. Not as much. Well, really, it wasn't as much.
Besides all of that, no matter how much the guy studies it, this is the problem with the American system, right? You cannot be an expert in everything. No. There's no way for this judge to be enough of an expert in Nazis threatening one another across state lines that he can also be an expert in video sharing protocols. It's so funny. I was thinking the same thing today. I was like, wait, when Ian said that it was the same guy that put Chris Cantwell in prison, I'm just like, this guy can't be an expert on anything. Well, I mean, he could be, certainly, but not on... And it's possible to be an expert on multiple things, but this American system, it seems to require this judge to be an expert, to be qualified, to make extremely nuanced decisions on any topic that comes before him, whether it's a Nazi who said something mean to another Nazi, or whether or not a video sharing protocol is a security. None of that makes any sense. Well, at the same time, who cares if they are experts anyway? Because like Seth A-Frame, the prosecutor in Ian's case, is a First Amendment expert. Well, I would like, if someone is going to make a decision about whether or not LBRY credits are securities, I want that person to be an expert in cryptocurrency and securities. Well, the judge in your case, Ian, I don't know why you would say it has nothing to do with blockchain, considering before we went into trial, the judge had to decide if Bitcoin is funds, and he just out of hand was like, yeah, it's funds. Blockchain is the third party. Duh. I'm pretty sure I'm not that old. Yeah, I mean, I'm not saying that he didn't have any decisions to make about blockchain, but a lot of the allegations in the Crypto 6 case weren't related specifically to how blockchain works, with the exception of money transmitter. After he decided Bitcoin is funds. Well, he didn't decide that. He copied another judge's opinion on that one. Well, and there's lots of legal, and I hate it, I disagree, but there's tons of legal precedents saying, well, Bitcoin is this is why Anessa made me so angry, because she was like, look, all of these people say this. Yeah. And ultimately, she's right, but like... All of these judges are wrong, of course, is the point. All of them have been wrong about this, and judges just say what other judges have said as citation for why they can say what they're saying. So if other judges were wrong and the current judge says the same thing, then he's backed up by the other judges. He literally said it's his opinion, though. He was like, it's funds... That's by definition. I mean, everything in law is an opinion. He said it's his opinion. Correct. That's his... He is the court. And it is the court's opinion that Bitcoin is funds. The court is incorrect about that opinion, but that's what they believe. Well, I certainly argue if we get a chance to somehow argue that in the appeal, then hopefully we'll be able to do that. I would certainly agree. I don't believe that Bitcoin is funds. I understand the judge believes it is, and other judges believe it is. Yeah. I disagree, right? But ultimately, as we learned and as we knew going into it, the judge is the one who gets to make that decision. It's not Arya's decision to make whether or not Bitcoin is money, and I don't feel like I'm any more qualified to make that decision than anyone else. However, I do know quite a bit about cryptocurrency, and I've learned a lot about economics and just money in general, and all of these things together, I don't believe Bitcoin qualifies as money.
How about just the fact that there's not a freaking law about it? Like, there's no law about Bitcoin being a fund. It's just something some judges have decided, and judges aren't supposed to make laws.
Well, there is now. It was amended to the existing law in 2021.
Nope. Still doesn't talk about it.
My attorney said it did.
Yeah, that's one way to interpret it, but...
Okay. Let's see, it comes right back to interpretation then, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Isn't it like digital...
No, the terminology, if I recall correctly, that they added was...
it gets all really complicated anyway.
It's not. They don't use the term virtual currency. They don't use the term cryptocurrency. It's like...
digital assets?
Substitution for... currency or something like that. And so
substitutions of value, I think, yeah.
That's so stupid. I've never been like, I've never even thought of cryptocurrency like that. This is just my substitution for $1. No, I'm giving you cryptocurrency and you're giving me something else in exchange.
You could make the argument that a stablecoin would fit that particular definition, as it literally is pretending to be the thing it's supposedly backed by.
If that's money, then a check is money. If I write Bonnie a check for $100, that check is therefore money.
Oh,
because
that would fit the definition.
But it's not money.
But it is. It is in reference to dollars specifically. The definition of money is...
I can see that one being a substitution for money.
Yeah, that's called a instrument in that case. The word for a check in the world of legal land is instrument.
Right, and I would buy that.
Monetary instrument.
But it itself, I would argue, is not the money.
No, it represents the money.
Yeah.
But the money itself is just representation of debt. I mean, the Federal Reserve notes themselves, that's all they are. So anyway, library is... so again, they were facing the potential for an injunction. And the injunction was... the SEC wants the judge to enjoin not just library, but its successors, assigns, agents, like this whole laundry list of people that are somehow connected to library. And they're arguing that Odyssey is the successor to library. Now, library's counter-argument was that Odyssey is not going to, and the judge seems to acknowledge this, library did not hand over its assets, not that it has any to hand over, but it didn't hand over its stock to Odyssey. It didn't hand over, key intellectual property to Odyssey or anything like that. So the library is saying, no, Odyssey is not our successor. Odyssey is a spin-off. We cut them loose. They were part of library in the past, but now they're their own separate company. By the way, their own separate company that is also not doing well financially. So if you want to support Odyssey, you probably should buy their subscribership thing. They've got like a way that you can pay a monthly fee to support
otherwise they're going to end up selling ad space and stuff like that.
They already have ads. But even with the ads, it's not working out.
That's weird. I haven't even ever noticed an ad on my app.
Well, you probably use an ad block.
Maybe it's not in the app.
Okay.
Maybe it's not in the app, but if you go to the website, you'll see it there.
Just more evidence that this ad-based model isn't going to work in the current times.
So they want this injunction. The judge says he doesn't want to enjoin people who weren't parties to the case. So he is reticent to do this. However, he has not yet made up his mind in this particular case. The case is under advisement, and they're going to jump through some more hoops legally, so it still isn't over yet for Library and Odyssey. There's more coming up. Why did you move to the Shire?
I moved here to the Shire because there's other people around who take liberty just as seriously as I do.
I moved to the Shire because I saw videos of people challenging authority and thought that I could get support myself. It called to me, like, do this, right now.
I wanted to be around people like me who got it, and once I got here, I knew there was nowhere else that I wanted to be.
I've always wanted to change the world, so I moved to the Shire to join people who were actually working towards doing the same thing.
The people here are awesome, loving, and positive. It was for the adventure and for the feeling of something important is happening here, and I just wanted to come to sort of be part of that.
Visit ShireSociety.com to read and sign the Shire Society Declaration and learn the reasons why, if you love liberty, you should immigrate to the Shire. Plus, connect with others via the forum at shiresociety.com. That's shiresociety.com.
From Feature Story News in New York, I'm William Denslow. US Secretary of State Antony Blinken says urgent steps are needed to avoid escalating violence between Israelis and Palestinians. At least 22 people have been killed in the past week in several retaliatory attacks. Blinken, who met Israel's newly elected Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu Monday, reiterated that a two-state solution is the best way to achieve a lasting peace. Kate Fisher reports from Washington.
Secretary Blinken has a long diplomatic to-do list, including Iran and Ukraine, but efforts to calm the security situation are likely to dominate his long-planned Middle East trip. Upon landing in Israel, Mr. Blinken gave a statement saying he had arrived at a pivotal moment. On Tuesday, he'll meet the Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas in Ramallah.
The United Nations says the humanitarian situation in Afghanistan is becoming extremely concerning. The world body and its partners say millions of people are on the brink of starvation. A UN delegation met with the Taliban-led government last week. Jody Jacobs has more from UN headquarters in New York.
The ban on women working in the NGO space is exacerbating the humanitarian situation in Afghanistan, according to the United Nations. UNICEF's Omar Abdi says apart from the 6 million people close to starvation, about 875,000 children are expected to suffer from severe acute malnutrition this year alone. While the UN delegation says talks with the Taliban-led government had not yielded any immediate change to the ban on women, they did say they will revisit the matter. The UN says if not reversed, this would be catastrophic and a death blow to humanitarian programs and the people of Afghanistan. Jody Jacobs at the United Nations.
British oil company BP says global carbon emissions will drop faster than it predicted just a year ago. The firm highlighted the war in Ukraine and new legislation in the US as major factors driving the switch to green energy. Giles Gibson reports.
BP says global demand for oil will fall by 5% by 2035 and 6% for natural gas. It says Russia's invasion of Ukraine is also likely to have, quotes, long-lasting effects on the global energy system. And it believes the Inflation Reduction Act in the US, which contains massive subsidies for green tech, will accelerate the development of wind and solar power. Despite this improved outlook, though, the planet is still far behind the sorts of cuts needed to reach net zero CO2 emissions by 2050.
And a sixth police officer has been suspended in connection with the death of Tyree Nichols. 5 other officers have been fired and face murder charges. Video was released on Friday showing Nichols being beaten by police following a traffic stop in Memphis, Tennessee. From bureaus worldwide, this is FSN.
We're still not sure why you'd want to watch, but our video feed is streaming nightly for free at cam.freetalklive.com.
It is Free Talk Live. You can join us here and bring up whatever you want. The number is 603-283-6160. We are giving you details on today's hearing in federal court, New Hampshire. Bonnie and I were there, as well as over 40 people, which is the largest turnout I have seen in years.
Yeah, I just saw the picture, and I was shocked by how many people came out for this.
Yeah, me too. I was really glad to see that many people coming out because, like I said, I haven't seen this many people in any Free Stater court hearing since Ademo Freeman had his trial in Manchester for quote-unquote wiretapping, where we filled the entire Manchester courtroom with probably 50 to 60 people.
Except they didn't stand for the judge.
The people in Manchester did not stand for the judge. Today, the majority of the audience sadly did
The rules are different in federal court, man.
No, they're really not.
I never got yelled at once for not standing for me and Chris and I don't remember who else,
there's
but
still
like, a ton of people.
persistent belief amongst people that if you don't do what the court wants you to do, that the judge will rule in a certain way, right? Like, so people are afraid they're going to hurt their friend by not standing for the judge. In my case, it's my religious belief to not stand for another man, right? Like, you're just a man. You're wearing a robe, and there's a bunch of men that'll follow your orders. But to me, you're just another man.
I don't believe that most judges are that capricious. Maybe at the city level, you might find some judge who's just that shallow and that
I've never seen it in New Hampshire.
Yeah.
I've seen it in Massachusetts. I've seen some people get pretty upset down there, but in New Hampshire, I've never seen it happen.
I suspect it's pretty rare, right? Because their entire job is to disregard everything else except the facts and to make the best determination they can based on the facts. Being upset because friends of the defendant didn't stand for you or whatever, it's sort of the opposite of what a judge is supposed to do.
By the way, if you want to join the show again, the number 603-283-6160 can bring up anything you want to discuss here. And we're going to continue with this topic because it's a pretty important one. Library is this media sharing protocol. It is an unstoppable media sharing protocol. They can shut this company down, and they're going to. That's what's coming. There's no way around that. Like that's
How
going
do they
to
have
happen.
the authority to shut down a company? How does that work?
They're out of business at this point. I
understand that.
And that's without even having the judgment against them as far as the monetary amount. That has yet to be decided. That's what's coming. After today's hearing, they have to decide the so-called disgorgement, which is, as I understand, the word I'd never heard before, but as I understand it, that's like them reaching in and pulling out whatever they possibly can.
Which is so weird because it's like there was 3 points they were going to talk about today. One was the injunction, and the second one was disgorgement. Then the third one was penalty. So they're going to disgorge them and then penalize them. And the judge even was like, how are we going to get blood from a stone? And the SEC kind of talked him down from that. He was like, oh, yeah, it's probably going to be about $50,000.
Yeah, so that would have been for the penalty phase. The judge said he is inclined to give what is considered a Tier 1 penalty. So I guess this is some sort of SEC case or whatever resolving tier. Okay. So there's Tier 1 is the lowest tier.
But
so
SEC was asking for like Tier 3.
Tier 2, Tier 3, yeah, whatever those would be. I don't know what those mean, okay? But
the prosecutors always ask for more.
The judge did say he was thinking of around $50,000 for a Tier 1 penalty. Now, if that's all that it was, Library might actually be able to survive this thing.
Yeah, but they don't. Do they have $50,000?
No, they don't.
But they could probably raise it.
They probably could, but that's not all this is going to be. They're going to probably hit them for, $14 million in so-called disgorgement or whatever.
I mean, they also have another, however long it takes them to. We didn't get into it yet, so sorry, I'm kind of skipping ahead. But they're going to force them to do more discovery, so more interviews with their employees, more looking into their accounting and stuff like that, and that's going to cost them more time with their lawyers.
Right.
So it's going to be more than $50,000 no matter what.
Oh yeah, right. So like they've already spent hundreds of thousands, if not millions, on attorneys' fees and things like that in this case. So they're done. The company is done. They haven't paid their employees since December 2nd, I believe, was testified to in court today, and there was a document that was filed to that extent. In fact, Library's attorney said at the end of the day today is like, well, look, Judge, even if you order this discovery that he's considering ordering them to jump through, because basically the government wants to know more about what they spent money on. So they said, well, if you spent money on paying something to Jeremy Kaufman and he wasn't supposed to get paid or whatever, like if you were going to,
that's not the government. That's Library and its shareholders. I don't think it's a public company, but that's Library and its employees' business.
No, everything is the SEC's business right now.
Well, they certainly would like to think so.
Every dime that they need to account for every dime or every Satoshi that Library has moved through in the last couple of years.
They need to disgorge them.
So they can disgorge it.
But that's
so
absolutely insane.
That's what they want to do.
At this company that I work for, my primary job, it's not the government's business if the company goes, all right, let's give Arya a $5,000 bonus. That's never happened, but if they do...
If they're being sued by the government, it is their business.
Well, no, the government will claim it's their business.
I mean, you and I don't think that it should be their business. We don't think the government should exist. But they're not private. They're a corporation, and they're being sued. And so the SEC has now won the lawsuit. And part of winning this lawsuit is this quote-unquote disgorgement, which is to say that any money that has been improperly paid out in a way that, let's say, like they wouldn't just cut a check to Jeremy, right? The theory is that the company would buy a thing and Jeremy would somehow get access to the thing and then could sell the thing to make money.
I think
right?
the word they used was funnel. Like they want to make sure it's not funneled to any top dogs in
so that's
the
their
company.
excuse for demanding more discovery. Remember, they've already gone through discovery. They've gone through, that's part of the early stages of a civil trial. When you get into a civil trial, there's like interrogatories where you have to sit down and answer questions. There's discovery where one side asks for the others to provide all the emails and provide all the documents and jump through all these ridiculous hoops. We don't usually have to deal with that in a criminal case, but there's reams of this stuff in a civil case.
I can only imagine. Yeah.
So now at the end, right when they thought this was the end of the trial, they thought Jeremy Kaufman was advertising this as the final hearing. Nope, now there's another one on Monday. But this was supposed to be maybe the final in-person hearing.
It's gonna be Zoom.
But it's still going. They figured they were going to get some sort of a determination today, but no, the judge still needs to make further determinations. He needs to order this discovery maybe, and then he's going to look at the discovery and determine what the disgorgement can be, and then whether or not there's going to be a tier 1 penalty, and whether or not he's going to write an injunction, and who that injunction could possibly enjoin. So all of this stuff is still up in the air. Though, to the judge's credit, he says he's disinclined to order an injunction against Odyssey. So
that makes sense. Odyssey is not part of the lawsuit.
It does make sense. Whether or not that's the end, how it ends up still is remaining to be seen. But the SEC wants to destroy Odyssey. The SEC is arguing that Odyssey is part of Library or a successor to Library, and so therefore should be enjoined in this injunction, which would quote unquote require them to so-called follow the law. Now
Odyssey has never made a security. Now, I would argue that Library hasn't either.
Indeed.
But Odyssey certainly has never made an asset of any type.
Nope. And the SEC has not sued them for that.
Right, because they haven't made one. So what possible standing could the SEC have to...
They're just saying
it's
they're
not
connected.
A security. It's not a currency.
No.
It's not an asset.
They're just saying they're
Odyssey's
connected.
Just a website.
They're just saying they're connected, and so therefore we get money from them too.
Well, that's insane.
That's what they want. And of course, Odyssey doesn't have any money either. They are essentially out of money. They're in the black. Or sorry, they're in the red. And they're not doing so hot. There are people I don't think are even getting paid right now either. But there was one big takeaway that I made a note here about, and this is something the judge did want people to know that was maybe misunderstood about his ruling, and I thought it was pretty important. And that it was that when he made his ruling that Library was a security, what he was saying wasn't that the token itself is a security, meaning that if you had Library tokens, which you wouldn't be allowed to do this because you're on bail conditions, right, as am I. But if you weren't on those conditions...
Last I checked, I did have some LBC, though, and I mean, that's been more than 2 years, so I may not still have it, but I thought I did.
Yeah, whether you even have access to the wallet again is another question. But let's say that you're off your restrictions and you want to sell that LBC on some exchange or sell it directly to Bonnie or something like that.
Sure.
The judge is saying that would not be a security. That is not just simply having Library tokens and selling those or buying those Library tokens is not engaging in a security. And that was one thing that was not, I guess, clear from his ruling before, because it sounded like, oh my God, every token is now a security based on what this judge has said. What he said was it was the, quote, offerings of the token that were the quote-unquote security offerings, a.k.a. a, quote, investment contract. That's what he was ruling.
Just that initial offering.
Well, I don't know if it was an initial offering or if it was an ongoing offering, but it was the fact that Library, the corporation, was purportedly, and again, I have not seen the evidence in the case. I don't know what they presented, but the claim from the SEC was because Library allegedly made at some point, someone in Library or even someone outside of Library made the claim that, well, we think these tokens are going to go up in value.
It was like someone on Reddit, right?
So that was one thing I heard about, yeah.
Like a former employee on Reddit was one of the things they used for evidence that Library claims that it will go up in value.
But basically any post they made at any point that might have even suggested that the tokens could go up in value would have been attributed to be, oh, this is a security. You're telling people they could make money on this token because you guys are going to do things to make it more valuable by building this network, building this platform, et cetera, et cetera. So that was the big thing that the judge wanted people to know today, is that whatever he comes out with as far as an order in this case, is supposedly going to clarify his ruling to say that it was just the quote-unquote offerings of the tokens. So the way that those tokens were sold was what he was saying was a so-called security, which, again, I don't believe in this security nonsense to me. It's like, I don't see how selling a token, even with a promise attached to it, could be considered a investment contract, right? Like, a contract to me sounds like you are presenting me something. You're presenting me like an actual agreement, and you're saying that in return for this amount of money, we're going to give you these tokens, and we're going to see that they increase in value, or we will try our best to increase in value.
That is a contractual agreement. You give me X, and in return, I will give you Y.
Yeah, but I think that's what I'm describing as a contractual agreement. But if it's just somebody on the internet saying, "Hey, we think these things are going to go up in value. We think if you want to buy them, here's how you buy them," I don't feel like that's a contract.
Even someone saying these are going to go up in value because they have like the intelligence to see that they probably will, and maybe even being wrong shouldn't make that a contract with someone else, you know?
Yeah.
It's just
But that's what the judge decided it was.
I don't agree that it's a security because I don't know what securities and all of that crap is, and it gets to the point where, you know, all you can do is really roll your eyes at all the terms used. But I could see how an initial coin offering of whatever description could qualify as a contract. I could see that.
Well, if you can see that, then that's why the judge ruled against LBRY in this particular case.
Well, I don't know if that's enough to. I don't know if that's enough to justify the ruling against LBRY, and I would certainly argue that it's not. And as you point out, even if it is a contract, I don't see what business that is of the SEC.
I was gonna say it's not like any of the three of us believe the SEC has any kind of right to exist or close down businesses. So.
But if I tell people, hey, you know, give me $50 and I will give you a sheet of paper that will ultimately be worth $100, I am sort of forming an agreement with you that if you give me X, then in return, I will give you Y.
But that's not what they said, right? They said that the thing could go up in value.
Right. Could is very different from will.
We think that it will go. We would like to believe that it will go up in value. Well, that's not a guarantee or anything like that. And another thing the judge pointed out today that I thought was really interesting was that this was the first that he was aware of, and the SEC didn't correct him on this, so it may be true. This was the first ever case regarding a token or cryptocurrency or an ICO, an initial coin offering, that had to do with no fraud. Meaning that there have been other cases that the SEC has brought against these fraudulent companies that were just straight up not even, they didn't have what they were offering, right? Like there's been a ton of these things where somebody cooks up some sort of token and they say, we've got this great magical, program idea that we're going to launch. And they never wrote a line of code. They don't have anything behind the scenes.
Those were so popular in like 2017, 2018, I think.
Yeah, just straight up lies, straight up, misdirection, misinformation. This is the first time the judge says the SEC has brought a case or won a case against a company who was not also committing fraud. So he was pointing out that LBRY didn't do anything dishonest, that there's no actual fraud claims in this case. And the SEC admitted, yep, we're not alleging any fraud. We're just saying you didn't follow our rules. Even though LBRY said, we tried to follow your rules. We asked you what the rules were, and you wouldn't tell us what the rules were. And they did everything they could to comply with the SEC. In fact, to the point where LBRY is now saying publicly...
Yeah, I want to read the tweet.
Okay, you've got it.
So the SEC brought in today, in some paperwork printed out for them, they were like, we would like to read to you this tweet that was tweeted by LBRY at LBRY.com, their own official Twitter.
Mm-hmm. So tweets are now being entered into the register.
Of course they are.
Oh yeah, it happened to nobody before. They showed where he tweeted, let's get the guillotines. Mm-hmm. And they were like, does this mean you want to kill people, politicians?
They brought my posts into filings before.
Well, anyway, so here it is. And first of all, the judge said, I don't even know what person in LBRY actually posted this. And Jeremy Kauffman raised his hand in court. So it's, quote, this is the biggest call we made wrong. We thought by being honest and open, the SEC would go after us last, but they actually went after us first because we made it easy. We cannot emphasize enough how important it is to obscure your activity from U.S. regulatory agencies.
I mean, it's not their fault that we live in this world where it's important to Obscure your activities from regulatory agencies, preferably with a decentralized autonomous organization. That way they have no Jeremy Kauffman or other figure to sue or to bring charges against.
Yeah.
However, Jeremy Kauffman and Library, they're not the ones who created these circumstances. They're just saying, hey guys, you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't. The best thing you can do is hide in the shadows.
And if they did hide and didn't do it well enough to where they got taken to court, they would be accused of, like trying to skirt around the rules. You're either skirting around the rules or you're just openly breaking them according, they'll switch the situation. The SEC will to fit their narrative.
Yeah, you're screwed no matter what you do.
So Library is, according to the judge, they're going to be gone. The corporation itself is done for. They also apparently have agreed to burn the pre-mine. And I believe the number thrown around in court today was 400 million
Wow,
tokens.
I didn't get.
Wasn't that what
that.
it was?
What does it mean, burn the pre-mine?
So they pre-mined, apparently, I think it was 400 million. I'm surprised you didn't make a note of that because you were taking a lot of notes, Bunny. But they, before the blockchain went public, they mined, a few hundred million of their own tokens.
Yeah.
And they held on to that.
Right.
And they were going to do things like pay the bills, pay their employees, and give them away as well. Give away the tokens in addition to sell them.
They have given away a lot of library tokens over the years.
So whatever they have left of their original pre-mine, and I'm not sure what that number is going to be quote-unquote burned. And usually that means that there's an address to which they can send that no one has access to.
How will the SEC confirm that?
I'm not sure.
How is anyone going to know that no one has the keys?
I think it might just be like straight zeros or something like that. I'm not sure how that all works. There's probably some mathematical answer to that question that I don't know.
Well, I mean, in theory, you could just create a wallet. This is a terrible idea, and not copy down the seed phrases or whatever, and then just take a hammer to that phone or whatever device you've established the wallet on, and then it's gone forever. It's burned.
Yeah, that could be. I mean, I guess in theory, someone could randomly. The odds that they could do it are near to infinitesimally slim. But in theory, someone could randomly generate that wallet.
Well, otherwise,
again.
somebody would have gotten Satoshi Nakamoto's coins.
I was wondering about that the other day. How, if you go to a brand new device and you install whatever wallet, and it generates a new address for you, how does it know that wallet has never been used by anyone else? So in theory,
it's just the odds are so slim. I don't know what they are, but they're near to impossible.
I figured it does a check. It probably scans the blockchain for existing addresses that have been used. It doesn't.
Well, what happens if it messes up and it
gives you someone else's keys?
In theory, that could happen.
What the heck?
But the odds are so slim. You could look it up somewhere. The odds are like 1 in a billion, million, trillion or something.
Well, yeah,
like
every
that.
single character in this increases the odds by a 30th power or whatever.
Yeah, and there's 30-something characters in a typical Bitcoin address.
So it's 30 to the power of 30. So it's extremely unlikely, but not impossible.
So anyway, the idea would be that you would send the coins to an impossible address or something that could not possibly be generated or whatever. There's a way to do it, okay? And in Ethereum, they do it all the time. Ethereum, for instance, whenever you pay a transaction fee nowadays, that's going to be burned. But that usually just means it goes to an address that no one has access to. So that's what they're supposedly going to do. That's how this is all going to come to an end, is those tokens are going to be burned. And maybe that's one of the reasons why the library token's up 35% today. It shot up in just the last 24 hours.
Wouldn't it be more beneficial for the United States, for library, for humanity in general, to just do an airdrop of these tokens maybe to everyone with a library credits wallet?
I don't know.
Or any other solution that isn't, okay, well, we want to fine library $80 billion, so let's have them light $80 billion on fire.
It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, that's so true. In dollars, that would never happen. That's such a good point.
No, it's an insane way of looking at things.
They would never literally light them on fire.
Yeah, just distribute it to everyone if that's what you want to do. Just say, okay, these are all the wallets. Let's just distribute it evenly.
They could.
And sure, maybe it's only 3
lines of code. That'd be done.
Yeah. 3 library credits per address or something like that. But
it'd be more than that. Library credits are worth less than 2 cents.
Yeah, but there's probably tens of billions of library addresses.
I don't know about that.
At any rate, any solution is better than just sending them to a sinkhole.
Well, in theory, the sending them to the sinkhole may be one of the reasons why the price is going up. Now, this isn't always
true. It decreases supply.
Well, right. The thing is, this isn't always true. A lot of times, the people in the crypto world will promote a certain feature, burning as a feature to their cryptocurrency. It's like, oh, well, on every transaction we burn 1% of the transaction or whatever. There's different cryptos out there that advertise this.
Why would this be good?
I think it's a bad thing. Yeah, they call it a deflationary cryptocurrency. The idea being that instead of the number going up over time of total crypto, the number would be going down over time.
Or just leave it alone and let the market sort it out.
Yeah, because it will deflate anyway for people losing their keys and stuff.
Yeah.
That's always kind of freaked me out about Bitcoin. It's like, what if one day, everybody's lost all their keys?
Well, everybody probably won't lose their keys. But people do lose their keys, and that's a fact. But my point is, for the cryptos that advertise this of like, we're going to lower the supply, we're going to burn all of our pre-mine, we're going to, whatever it is, it doesn't always result in higher prices. You would think it would, right? Because, well, lower supply means higher price, but that presumes the demand is still increasing, right? Like if this is some low value token and you burn half of the supply of the low value token, if no one's buying the token generally, then is it really going to matter? Like, for instance, Library only had $67,000 in trading volume in the last 24 hours. Like
that's it.
Yeah, it's not even in the top. It's barely in the top 1,000 cryptocurrencies right now. So, like, even though there's over 600 million library credits in supply, it's not moving a lot. There's not a lot of action on the of the actual tokens. So I don't think that you're gonna see, even though like half apparently of these tokens are going to be burned, I don't think you're gonna see the price double. But I could be wrong.
No, I certainly don't think it'll double. As you said, the price will probably go up.
Yeah, there was conversation in the hallway before the hearing today where people were like, LBC is probably going to go up today. But my thought is,
it did.
What if people, but
that's so
altogether, forever, like if it keeps going. Well,
it went up in the last hour.
I'm just saying, into the future, don't you think it'll probably go down because people will be like, they kind of took apart the business?
It's hard to say. I mean, the story of Library is not over. That's the thing here. Like, this part is the only sure thing right now. We know for sure the company is going to go away. We don't know whether Odyssey, its spinoff, and the alternative platform, the leading alternative in my mind to YouTube right now, is going to go away. That's still a question mark.
But it's looking better for it today than it was this morning.
It is. I would say that's true. That's a fair takeaway from what we saw. I would say I'm optimistic that Odyssey will at the very least not be destroyed by the SEC in this moment. Whether the SEC brings a case against Odyssey next is another question, because they seem to have it out for them.
And the judge specifically said, if you want to take this up with Odyssey, you're always able to file your own news suit with Odyssey.
And there's more. We can share it. You can share your thoughts. It's Free Talk Live.
So the protection of life, liberty, and property is what the Free State Project is all about. But it's an effort to move 20,000 people who understand.
It's about demonstrating to the entire country
that, we can have a free market, a truly free market.
Making it just a freer, great place to live.
It's the world's largest voluntarist libertarian community, and it's only getting bigger.
That's amazing, to be able to move to a place where other people passionately believe in being free and independent.
What the Free State Project is managing to do, though, is to put their money where their mouth is. Physically getting up across the country and saying, let's go someplace and let's demonstrate the power of these ideas. There's a lot of kind of philosophy that surrounds liberty. There's a lot of thinking about it and talking about it. But here in New Hampshire, people are doing it.
101 Reasons Liberty Lives in New Hampshire, a documentary by Free State Project Early Movers. Watch it free at 101reasonsfilm.com. 101reasonsfilm.com.
There are basically two types of advertising: direct response and branding. Radio's great for direct response with its low cost to listener ratio, but audio can't be beat for branding, which is a longer term endeavor. You want to be the first thing that someone thinks of when they think about your product or service. If you have a local business that you want kept top of mind in your community, call the station. If you need national reach, Free Talk Live's got around 200 radio stations, millions of monthly listening sessions, can suit all budgets, and if we don't think we're right for you, we'll tell you. Email me, mark@freetalklive.com.
Tired of cancel culture? Sick of mega tech corporations holding an axe over your head? Join the LRN.FM Matrix chat server. It's self-hosted, so no one else can tell us what to do or say. Don't like the existing channels? You can make your own. You can even connect into some of our channels from other Matrix servers. It's federated. For the full LRN.FM Matrix experience, though, you should join our server via the step-by-step instructions at chat.lrn.fm. chat.lrn.fm.
You're listening to the live edition of Free Talk Live. Hour number 2 is next after the news here on the Liberty Radio Network at LRN.FM.
From Feature Story News in New York, I'm William Denslow. US Secretary of State Antony Blinken says urgent steps are needed to avoid escalating violence between Israelis and Palestinians. At least 22 people have been killed in the past week in several retaliatory attacks. Blinken, who met Israel's newly elected Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu Monday, reiterated that a two-state solution is the best way to achieve a lasting peace. Kate Fisher reports from Washington.
Secretary Blinken has a long diplomatic to-do list, including Iran and Ukraine, but efforts to calm the security situation are likely to dominate his long-planned Middle East trip. Upon landing in Israel, Mr. Blinken gave a statement saying he had arrived at a pivotal moment. On Tuesday, he'll meet the Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas in Ramallah.
The United Nations says the humanitarian situation in Afghanistan is becoming extremely concerning. The world body and its partners say millions of people are on the brink of starvation. A UN delegation met with the Taliban-led government last week. Jody Jacobs has more from UN headquarters in New York.
The ban on women working in the NGO space is exacerbating the humanitarian situation in Afghanistan, according to the United Nations. UNICEF's Omar Abdi says apart from the 6 million people close to starvation, about 875,000 children are expected to suffer from severe acute malnutrition this year alone. While the UN delegation says talks with the Taliban-led government had not yielded any immediate change to the ban on women, they did say they will revisit the matter. The UN says if not reversed, this would be catastrophic and a death blow to humanitarian programs and the people of Afghanistan. Jody Jacobs at the United Nations.
British oil company BP says global carbon emissions will drop faster than it predicted just a year ago. The firm highlighted the war in Ukraine and new legislation in the US as major factors driving the switch to green energy. Giles Gibson reports.
BP says global demand for oil will fall by 5% by 2035 and 6% for natural gas. It says Russia's invasion of Ukraine is also likely to have, quotes, long-lasting effects on the global energy system. And it believes the Inflation Reduction Act in the US, which contains massive subsidies for green tech, will accelerate the development of wind and solar power. Despite this improved outlook, though, the planet is still far behind the sorts of cuts needed to reach net zero CO2 emissions by 2050.
And a 6th police officer has been suspended in connection with the death of Tyree Nichols. 5 other officers have been fired and face murder charges. Video was released on Friday showing Nichols being beaten by police following a traffic stop in Memphis, Tennessee. From bureaus worldwide, this is FSN.
With FSN Spotlight, I'm Simon Marks, looking today at the latest developments in Afghanistan, where, as we've reported in recent weeks, efforts to get the Taliban to allow women to play a role in healthcare and humanitarian assistance are still underway. 2 UN delegations visited Kabul last week and think they secured a commitment to unveil new Taliban guidelines that could allow women back into some non-governmental workplaces. But it's unclear whether officials who made those pledges have the authority to effect change. Bob McMahon is with the US-based Council on Foreign Relations.
You take women out of the equation and you severely restrict your ability to help them. And it doesn't matter if the Taliban are able to bring battalions of men into the front lines in all these areas. It's not going to work the way it needs to work, certainly in healthcare, where the Taliban will admit women should treat women. A very high-level group of UN officials came last week, led by the Deputy Secretary General, Amina Mohammed, a woman, who was not addressed eye to eye by a number of Afghan Taliban leaders, but nevertheless got her message across. but it's not clear how much is really going to be able to happen and how much the Taliban is willing to endure or allow its people to endure before something breaks here.
There is agreement that the Taliban are at least ready to discuss the issue, but with millions of Afghans relying on assistance that in some cases has only been delivered by women, the outcome of all this remains deeply uncertain. With FSN Spotlight, I'm Simon Marks.
FSN is an independent source of news for TV, radio and digital networks worldwide. You can find more of our minute-by-minute updates on Twitter. Follow us there at Feature Story. And we have a wealth of audio and video stories from our global news bureaus on Facebook. You can find us there by following Feature Story News. Stay tuned for further updates right here. But for now, that's the latest Feature Story News. William Denslow reporting.
This is William Chambers. Now a retired insurance salesman, Chambers is just one of over 95% of grandfathers who, according to a new report from the Center of Business Intelligence, secured their first and only job by walking right up to the owner of a business and asking for a position right then and there.
I slammed my fist on the desk and said, "I'm your man." He stood right up. He shook my hand and said, "You come in first thing Monday morning."
According to the report, nearly 36% of grandfathers claim that they found employment by entering a local business with nothing but a nickel in their pockets and a shirt on their backs. 24% saw a fine-looking marquee for a business and said, "Someday my name's going to be on that sign." And 40% of grandfathers said they snuck into the CEO's office and said, "Mr. McKinley, sir, I'm your guy."
It just took gumption. You didn't need some fancy internship. Looking the boss dead in the eye and showing him you were a man. That was your internship.
This is the Onion News Network.
You can help spread the ideas of liberty with our Patreon for just $5 per month at amps.freetalklive.com. Free Talk Live.
It is Free Talk Live. We are kicking off the second hour of the show. The phones are open, and you can join us here. The number is 603-283-6160. That's 603-283-6160. And Free Talk Live is brought to you by listeners like you on our AMPS program at amps.freetalklive.com. That's amps.freetalklive.com. You can go there and you get signed up for as little as $5 a month, and it helps us advertise, market, promote, and support Free Talk Live. If you appreciate the work that we do here, you can contribute directly to that work of spreading the message of freedom and peace and liberty and cryptocurrency every single night on broadcast radio and online as well. You get some perks like access to the AMP-only podcast, which has the full radio show without the recorded commercials, and you can do that over at amps.freetalklive.com. That's amps.freetalklive.com. Here tonight, it's Ian.
It's Bonnie.
And Aria.
So if you're just tuning in, we've spent the first hour of the show. We're going to get into economic frustrations that Americans are having right now. The American people are pissed at the government. Number one, apparently. There's a Gallup poll that we're going to share with you coming up here. But also, they're upset about inflation. Number two, understandably. Of course, the government caused the inflation, so that's all kind of one answer. But we want to get deeper into that. But first, we've been talking about a case that is kind of near and dear to our hearts here on Free Talk Live, considering we were one of the earliest adopters of the library protocol for our video archives. We've been doing video streaming on the show for, I don't know, most of the last decade, I think. Maybe the whole last decade.
I know I've been using libraries since before. I mean, I lived in Mississippi when I started using a library.
Wow.
I mean, since 2016, I think.
Yeah, I think we were around that time frame, 2016, 2017, somewhere in there. We found out about library because it was created here in New Hampshire by a Free State Project early mover, Jeremy Kaufman. Free State Project, of course, is the migration of libertarian activists to come to New Hampshire and try to make things better here. And it was introduced to us and seemed like a no-brainer. Like, this is a great idea. We can decentralize video sharing and other things. You can also upload audio to library. It's a media sharing protocol.
PDFs? Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Protocol, meaning that it is the lowest level sort of programming that there is, basically. Like HTTP, that thing that you see in front of every web URL, that stands for Hypertext Transfer Protocol, I think. I think that's what it is. And that's protocol. The P on that is protocol. FTP is file transfer protocol. So the internet is made up of these protocols.
Which is just procedures on how things communicate with one another.
Yeah, basically. So anybody can write software that uses the library protocol to facilitate people in uploading and sharing and downloading media files. And so it decentralizes that. It takes it out of the hands of the big tech corporations like YouTube or, you fill in the blank, Twitter, whatever, and it puts it in the hands of the individual. It decentralizes the power. And so that, of course, is what Bitcoin and the blockchain did for money in 2009. And so what LBRY does is it takes that power of blockchain and it decentralizes media sharing. Sort of like Bitcoin decentralized the power of money, that LBRY does the same thing for the power of publishing, right? Yes. So that's, of course, why it's being targeted by the federal government, why the SEC is trying to destroy the LBRY Corporation, and at this point has basically succeeded at destroying the LBRY Corporation. I mean, we're basically in the process right now of the gutting, or the quote-unquote disgorgement, which is the actual legal term that they're using here to describe what they're about to do to the LBRY Corporation. The definition, now this isn't from a legal dictionary, this is just dictionary.com, of to disgorge is to eject or throw out from the throat, mouth, or stomach, to vomit forth.
Wow, you were right, Ian. Because whenever we were in court, I was like, what does that mean? And Ian said, sounds like throwing up.
Yeah. Definition 2 is to surrender or yield something, especially something illicitly obtained. That's going to be the more legal definition. To 3, discharge forcefully or as a result of force. So they are literally reaching into the belly of LBRY and they are pulling any life that they can, anything that remains in this corporation, any value that they can suck out like a vampire. They're going to just take all of it.
But that's not the penalty, because
no, that's not even the penalty phase.
Yeah, because they own that. They deserve that from LBRY.
And it's obvious why the government would want to do this. For those who don't know, COVID-19 was a thing that happened. And during the era of COVID-19, the pandemic at its height, you weren't allowed to say something that conflicted with the CDC or its recommendations online. Facebook would kick you off. Twitter would kick you off. YouTube would kick you off.
YouTube will.
I don't know if they're still actively...
we got a strike a few weeks ago. We were off streaming for a whole week because of it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Somebody else I listened to, he is on Odyssey, and I listened to him on Odyssey, but he also does YouTube. And just the other day, he was like, I only post any of my videos that mention, the ouchie, which is, he's talking about the vaccine, on Odyssey, because otherwise I'll get my third strike on
get thrown
YouTube.
Off.
Yeah. So... that's the world we live in right now. And apply that to any other issue, like the Ukraine war between Russia and Ukraine. If you speak out against Ukraine or whatever, if you point out that there are Nazis in Ukraine, it's just a matter of time before this apparatus that is the censorship apparatus, the ability of the government. And we know because of the Twitter files. Look, I hate Elon Musk as much as I don't hate him. I dislike Elon Musk as much as anyone out there. However, he did release the Twitter files, which showed that the government came to Twitter and said, hey, look, we want you to get rid of this content.
Over and over and over and over.
And this is also happening on YouTube and Twitter and Instagram and all of these other places. LBRY, as an institution, as an idea, is immune to that. You can't go to LBRY and say, we want you to take off this content, because there is no them to take it off. The content's there.
When the European Union said that the RT channel, the Russia Today television channel, had to be banned across the continent of Europe, Odyssey said, you can get it over here.
Yep.
Like they pointed out, oh yeah, we've got that.
Because LBRY can't ban RT even if they wanted to.
Well, they can't ban RT's posts on LBRY, but technically Odyssey could.
Odyssey could, but LBRY can't.
Right, but as a platform, Odyssey did not.
Right.
They did not follow what the world was, quote-unquote, doing to RT. And in fact, they pointed out, well, we've got that. Because Odyssey has live streaming, which is more centralized, right? Like that's you got to have a content delivery network. There's some decentralized alternatives for live streaming, but they're clunky and they don't work so great right now. So like Odyssey is not LBRY. And that's one of the points that was made in the hearing today is Odyssey should not be subject to a disgorgement or a penalty or a injunction as a quote-unquote successor to Odyssey or to Library, because Odyssey isn't Library. It is reliant on many centralized services. It relies on the dollar for being paid. Odyssey is a platform. Odyssey is a business. Is it using the Library blockchain? Yeah, it is. But it's not the critical aspect of its business. It could strip that out.
It could still work without Library.
And it's immaterial whether or not it uses Library. Like Google Chrome didn't create HTTP.
That's right.
It didn't create HTML5 or whatever version of HTML they're on now, probably 7 or 8 or whatever. It didn't create any of these things. And the internet, the websites that you can visit when you go to google.com and you type in something using Chrome or Firefox or whatever, Firefox and Chrome can render those websites just fine, but Firefox didn't create any of those protocols or any of those standards. It just uses them.
Similarly, Odyssey, even though some of the programmers might have been involved in the creation of the Library protocol.
I'm sure some people who work on Google Chrome or Firefox helped conceive HTML 8.0 or whatever version they're on now.
So that is the big question that still remains. The judge did indicate that he is not likely to rule that Odyssey will be subject as a successor, so they will not be subject to the injunction. That's what he said at the end of the day today, but he still hasn't made the ruling. He's still waiting to see what the remaining discovery shows, which he has yet to actually order. He may still not order the discovery, but he sounds like he's leaning towards that, even though Library pointed out that they probably can't even comply with the discovery because there's literally no one left with which to comply. Library's employees are out of a job. There's no more money to pay them. The SEC has ruined this business to the point where it can't even afford to pay people to comply with the SEC.
Well, that's what the SEC wanted.
Yeah. Well, now the SEC wants more. You see, that's the whole point of the hearing today.
It doesn't want to just destroy Library. It wants to make an example and make sure that no one else ever has the audacity to create a censorship-proof platform in the future.
You make another point here, Arya, and that reminds me of something that I did take a note on, that I wanted to point out here, that the judge in this particular case, oh man.
What was it about? Maybe you can jog my memory.
The SEC, sorry.
Seems like it had to do with the SEC wanting to set an example of Library.
Yeah, something about them setting an example, and I'm sorry, I thought I had it down.
They said they need to have enough penalty.
Deterrence.
Yeah,
deterrence. That was the word, deterrence. So the judge said that he thinks this, because Library was not quote-unquote dishonest, they were upfront about whatever they were doing, but they allegedly broke the securities law.
Whatever that is.
The Securities Act.
Right. They said, oh, well, you were supposed to register with the SEC that y'all were selling a security. And, of course, if you do that, that means that you can't actually sell to anything but accredited investors, as I understand it. And an accredited investor is somebody that's got over $1 million to spend. So basically it would completely have, prohibited anyone from buying into the Library token if they were to do it quote-unquote legally, unless they were super rich people, which is ridiculous. But because, if you want to decentralize things, you don't just sell it to the super rich, right? So anyway, the judge said, okay, I don't think they should get more than a tier 1 penalty. But because of the need for quote-unquote deterrence, the judge said today that another company that tried to do the same thing that Library did, which is to say sell a token allegedly representing that it might go up in value, therefore it's a security. If you didn't register it as a security, then they come after you in the same way that they would come after Library here. The judge said that company would not be looking at a tier 1 penalty, because everybody's supposed to know about this obscure court case that happened in a New Hampshire federal court. Like anybody that just goes and rolls up their own token tonight or this week or whatever, launches a website and says they got some new thing that they want to promote, they're supposed to know what happened to Library. So
yeah, I'd never heard of Library till I met you guys.
Right. So how is everyone supposed to know what's going on in this court case? That's how important these judges think of themselves. Like the odds that somebody who's a technologist type person, somebody who's a programmer, somebody who's got a great idea for a token, is going to have a history of the court cases of the SEC's enforcement and prosecution division, is going to have some sort of knowledge about that before they decide to roll out their token and announce it to the world and say, hey, I think you should buy my token because I'm a really cool programmer and I'm going to make this really neat thing and it could go up in value. Boom! Now you're offering an unlicensed security or unregistered security, but because Library went before you, Now you don't get the tier 1 penalty. You're going to get a tier 2 or a tier 3 or whatever the hell penalty they want to give you.
It's sad that that's how laws are actually written. Laws aren't like written in a book, put out into public, and alerted to the public, so the public is like, this is the new law. It's just, this was decided in a court case you probably didn't hear about.
Right.
And now it's law, and there is no legislator involved. The freaking SEC unelected bureaucrat and a judge. Dimwit judge.
The only way you would hear about this case is if you are a total crypto news junkie and you're paying attention to the news of crypto and you're looking at all the details about this particular case. Then you would know about it. But the odds that you're going to be a programmer who's got your nose to the grindstone, you're creating something you think's amazing, and you just want to introduce it to the world, now you're going to get punished harsher because library already got punished, and you should have known about the library case. It was absolutely absurd.
Yeah, and what they're thinking is, before you start selling your token or whatever, you should hire an attorney and get your attorney, and your attorney should be the expert. But look, imagine how much technology, how much innovation we would lose if someone had to stop and go, wait a minute, I better consult an attorney before I invent the automobile or the automatic transmission or the cell phone or whatever. Some of these, you've got to free the human spirit to create things.
Yeah, it didn't help in the Crypto 6 case. I did hire an attorney. Yeah. And that attorney wrote a 4-page paper as to why the money transmitter laws don't apply. Didn't help.
Yeah, sadly.
Didn't care. Jury didn't care. So, what good would it do to hire an attorney in this particular case? All the attorney's going to tell you to do is, whoa, you don't want to do that. And then they'll just talk you out of it, right?
Maybe.
Or they'll talk you into spending hundreds of thousands of dollars to hire them to take you through some sort of application or whatever with the SEC and jump through hoops that you maybe didn't have to legally jump through.
And then the SEC doesn't give you an answer anyway, and they
won't tell you how
to.
Won't tell you how to jump the hoops, which is what library was trying to get them to do the whole time. Was all right. Y'all say you have hoops, so what are they? Tell us what the hoops are. Tell us how we can jump through them. Oh, you won't do that. Oh, okay. Well, I guess we'll just try. And okay, that didn't work. Now we're going to go out of business.
Ambiguity functions on behalf of the government. Right. The more vague they are, the more ways they can interpret their law to apply to more and more people.
Yeah, it's disgusting what they're doing to library. But the takeaway here is, as Jeremy Kaufman pointed out in his Twitter post on library, was that had they been less forthcoming, it actually would have helped their case. Had they not turned over all of the information that they had turned over to the SEC with the idea of, hey, let's be transparent. Hey, let's tell the SEC everything that we can. We're being honest here.
Yeah,
we're
but you never want to talk to the cops. Just because it's the SEC doesn't change anything. Don't talk to the cops.
They thought it was going to help them. They thought that they thought they could get through this alive.
Yeah.
And they're dead. Like, this is literally dead man walking. This company isn't even breathing at this point. It has no life left. And the SEC says that's not enough. The fact that you're lying there on the ground, coughing up blood, you're about to take your last breath. No, now we're going to plunge a knife into your chest and twist it around a little bit just so we can disgorge as much of your life onto the pavement as we possibly can.
Deter other entrepreneurs from making money that we don't get a cut of.
That's what this is all about.
And,
just like it was with Ross Ulbricht.
Not even just one cut of one company's. It's not just about one cut of libraries' money. It's about deterring people from prospering in the future so that they have to be reliant on the government.
Yeah. The best thing you can do at this point, if you're an entrepreneur in the crypto space, is to leave the United States.
Sadly.
I don't know where the best place to go is. That's the other question is, where can you go where there are not insane psychopaths like the United States government people? Because the government people exist everywhere. But the question is, are there government people who are at least welcoming enough to say, yeah, we like crypto. We understand that if we allow crypto development here, it's actually going to bring in brilliant minds. It's going to bring in brilliant entrepreneurs. It's going to bring in millions of dollars in revenue, new businesses. We need that money. So maybe it's going to be one of these small island nations like St. Kitts or something like that. I don't know. I don't want to go out on a limb. I don't want to tell somebody there's a best place to go. I just know it ain't here. It isn't the United States.
No, and I would love for it to be one of these islands. But again, when I look at human history and the way the world is right now, I just don't see much real on the ground hope for liberty until human beings are colonizing other planets. Only then, when we have a planet where we can go and we can make our libertarian society and just never establish a government in the first place, never establish a state in the first place.
Yeah, they're going to come in with their death warships or whatever.
Well, just like they did in the American Revolution, right? But the advantage then is that there's so much distance between the colony and the home government that they wouldn't be able to successfully do it. But I mean, if you were to do it right now, if you were to just take one of these islands like St. Kitts or whatever and establish this libertarian paradise, it's relatively easy for them to attack and invade and crush said little island paradise because traveling across the ocean, not a very big deal these days. However, traveling across the planets in those early days, or traveling across space to reach another planet, it's going to be a big deal at first. So they will have that
really
time.
do that, right? Like they
will. I mean, they sort of do. Like the European Union came down on Italy a number of years ago because Italy was charging lower corporate taxes. And they were like, no, you're undercutting all the other countries.
Yeah, but they're part of the
European
EU.
Yeah, but even if they weren't, they would still do it. I mean, you can't undercut us because that's driving all of these corporations to you, and now we're not getting a cut of it. So shape up and raise your taxes, or we're going to do something to you.
I don't know.
Dave Ridley actually had a pretty interesting story, and I'm not going to remember any of the details because I heard it from him like over a year ago. But there was some island nation owned by, I think, France or Spain, down by South America. And when they wanted to secede, France or Spain was like, no. They tried to send ships down there, but the ships like ran out of gas, and it just didn't cost enough money. And this was like in the 2010s. It wasn't like, the 1800s. So they had just turned around. And yeah, it just wasn't worth the money. So they seceded.
Yeah. And some of these island nations are actually relatively new as far as.
But then it's like the governments around South America could easily just be like, we want that island. And the other thing is, what kind of quality of life do you have on some island that is impossible to reach from giant countries?
You could have a huge quality of life if you get enough billionaires or whatever. But like, look, it's a big if though. If 100 of the world's billionaires were like, hey, let's go to this island and let's just not establish a government. We're just billionaires and we're going to take all our money there and all our gold is there. They're not going to have the resources that the United States goes, wow, there's 100 billionaires over there on this island. We can just go take their stuff and they can't do anything about it. I believe the United States government would. And if they wouldn't, then the Russian government would, or the Chinese government would. And then it's not an arms race at that point. It's just a race to see which one can loot the island first. This is why I think it'll have to be when we're colonizing other planets, because it gives them that space, that enormous distance they have to travel.
I don't know.
I mean, we laugh about it, but it's the future. It's going to happen. Humans are either going to annihilate themselves or we are going to explore the stars.
I think that
or number 3 would just be like that human beings evolved and changed their way of thinking, because that's where this all starts. It all starts in a way of thinking that you have rights or could possibly gain rights that other people don't have.
I don't have enough faith in humanity, though. I do in human as a concept, and like humanity is this overarching concept, but like 99% of people, they don't want freedom, and they're not going to evolve to want freedom. They're going to continue wanting the state and control over others.
I don't think I buy what you're saying, Arya, that putting more billionaires or whatever on an island is going to make it so the government of the United States or Russia invades that place, because there's already a lot of wealth on these islands. There's already a lot of people who are millionaires, maybe billionaires, I don't know, right? Like the banks aren't going to tell you, but these international banks are located on these islands. There are places where there's certain places in the world that are sort of attractive for what you might call a tax shelter, where people can locate their money and get a passport down there and places like that. There's a large
But the U.S. government
community.
did come down on the Cayman Islands and other places like that.
What did they do?
I don't remember the specifics now, but they did come, like this offshore banking thing, they did come down on them. I don't remember exactly what it was, but if they had resisted too much, I mean, certainly, maybe they wouldn't have invaded, but they would have stopped just short of that. They would have embargoed the crap out of it. Yeah. I don't agree with Mark on a lot, but I think on this subject, he is right, where if you didn't want to comply, then they're just going to cut you off from the international banking system, and then what do you do?
Well, we're going to, whether it's an island or whether it's New Hampshire seceding from the United States, I think we're going to find out what's going to happen, because I don't think we're going to need to get people together to move to the moon or some other planet. That's certainly not going to likely happen in our lifetime. Right. But we can get enough liberty-minded people together to the same geographic area, and then we'll see what happens. because there are enough people to do that today. And there's more coming up here in moments. You can join the show and bring up what you want on Free Talk Live.
Do you ever say, I could care less, when you really mean the opposite? You mean to say, I couldn't care less. It's a common mistake. You are judged by how you speak, especially if you're looking for work, with so many more applicants than openings now. But even if you're not, avoiding common misstatements will help you make the most of the dozens of conversations and transactions that crowd your daily routine. So whatever you say, don't say whatever as a single word sentence. It's the most annoying expression in the American English language, according to a recent poll. And avoid cliches like the plague. Just kidding. But seriously, at the end of the day, you'll want to avoid this scenario, sounding like everyone else. For more tips, hit survivalspeech.com. I'm Holland Cook.
From Feature Story News in New York, I'm William Denslow. US Secretary of State Antony Blinken says urgent steps are needed to avoid escalating violence between Israelis and Palestinians. At least 22 people have been killed in the past week in several retaliatory attacks. Blinken, who met Israel's newly elected Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu Monday, reiterated that a two-state solution is the best way to achieve a lasting peace. Kate Fisher reports from Washington.
Secretary Blinken has a long diplomatic to-do list, including Iran and Ukraine, but efforts to calm the security situation are likely to dominate his long-planned Middle East trip. Upon landing in Israel, Mr. Blinken gave a statement saying he had arrived at a pivotal moment. On Tuesday, he'll meet the Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas in Ramallah.
The United Nations says the humanitarian situation in Afghanistan is becoming extremely concerning. The world body and its partners say millions of people are on the brink of starvation. A UN delegation met with the Taliban-led government last week. Jody Jacobs has more from UN headquarters in New York.
The ban on women working in the NGO space is exacerbating the humanitarian situation in Afghanistan, according to the United Nations. UNICEF's Omar Abdi says apart from the 6 million people close to starvation, about 875,000 children are expected to suffer from severe acute malnutrition this year alone. While the UN delegation says talks with the Taliban-led government had not yielded any immediate change to the ban on women, they did say they will revisit the matter. The UN says if not reversed, this would be catastrophic and a death blow to humanitarian programs and the people of Afghanistan. Jody Jacobs at the United Nations.
British oil company BP says global carbon emissions will drop faster than it predicted just a year ago. The firm highlighted the war in Ukraine and new legislation in the US as major factors driving the switch to green energy. Giles Gibson reports.
BP says global demand for oil will fall by 5% by 2035 and 6% for natural gas. It says Russia's invasion of Ukraine is also likely to have, quotes, long-lasting effects on the global energy system. And it believes the Inflation Reduction Act in the US, which contains massive subsidies for green tech, will accelerate the development of wind and solar power. Despite this improved outlook, though, the planet is still far behind the sorts of cuts needed to reach net zero CO2 emissions by 2050.
And a sixth police officer has been suspended in connection with the death of Tyree Nichols. 5 other officers have been fired and face murder charges. Video was released on Friday showing Nichols being beaten by police following a traffic stop in Memphis, Tennessee. From bureaus worldwide, this is FSN.
Yep, we still do email. Drop your email address in the entry box at freetalklive.com and you'll be kept in the loop with Free Talk Live.
It is Free Talk Live, and the phones are open here. If you want to join the show, you can do that. The number is 603-283-6160. That's 603-283-6160. And here in the studio tonight, it's Ian.
It's Bonnie.
And Aria.
I think we can finally move on, unless, Bonnie, you felt like there was some aspect of today's court hearing that regarding library.
No, it's just really
that we didn't
sad.
cover.
The state of entrepreneurship in the United States is just ridiculous and sad. It's nothing like what it should be.
Yeah, it was really it was a sad thing to watch, and it's not over yet. The bloodletting has not yet completed, although it's darn close to being over.
I don't even know how people can complain about capitalism in America.
What do you mean?
I know.
People are like, capitalism this and that, capitalism caused this. That you can't be a capitalist in America at all.
No, they're confused, and I understand, where they're coming from. I disagree with them, and I wish they would listen rather than going, "Oh, you're evil libertarian capitalist monsters." Like, look, no. I understand why you think capitalism is what you think it is. Talking to the liberals out there who hate capitalism, I understand. You were brought up by teachers and colleges by a society that told you capitalism was evil and doing all these evil things, exploiting people, being racist, being homophobic, being this heteronormative, cis white male patriarchy thing. I understand. But that is not what capitalism is. That's not what the free market is supposed to be. Mm-hmm. What we have here is a system where the government, the state, controls everything, and it picks winners and it picks losers. And the people, you and I out there listening, working our minimum wage jobs, living paycheck to paycheck, we are always the ones chosen to be the losers for the benefit of like Lockheed Martin, Bank of America, Wells Fargo, Tesla, Twitter, not Twitter less so at the moment, but Tesla, SpaceX, NASA, all of these corporations and quasi-governmental agencies, the government is looting us. Look at what happened with Pfizer. Through the COVID-19 pandemics, Pfizer and Johnson & Johnson and Moderna you probably never heard of prior to the COVID-19 pandemic.
No, I never had.
They're making higher profits than they've ever recorded in their history. And you go, oh, the COVID-19 shot was free, but it wasn't. Mm-hmm. The government was raising people's taxes, and it was inflating the currency, and it was giving money directly to those evil pharmaceutical companies. And I shouldn't have to remind people about this. 5 years ago, you knew, liberals out there listening to me say this, you knew that Pfizer was evil. Yeah. You knew that Johnson & Johnson was evil. You didn't want to be forced to pay for them, to line the...
What happened?
To line the pockets of their CEOs while they're buying $80 billion yachts. We knew this.
How did that change?
They got scared. COVID-19 came along.
So all they had to do, the government just had to trot out some guy in a lab coat, Dr. Fauci, and he had to just make some claims, and then all of a sudden you can trust the big pharmaceutical corporations. It makes absolutely no sense. There's no critical thinking here at all. That just completely went out the window.
And this is just one tiny microcosm of this. This is happening in all manner of industries all over the United States. The pharmaceutical industry in COVID-19 was just the most recent, most obvious example. But it's happening everywhere. We're constantly being looted in order to line the pockets of the ultra-wealthy.
And it's the opposite of progressive. How are we supposed to progress in society if we can't even have actual scientists focusing on finding the truth about the reality of nature? Instead, they're doing the bidding of their people who give them money.
I don't know. It's a broken system, and it's not going to get any better as long as we're allowing the government to continue picking winners and losers.
And it's for profit, by the way. It doesn't matter if it's government related. Government scientists creating drugs or pharmaceuticals to sell. I mean, aren't liberals supposed to hate for profit things? That's it's a evil, perverted version of capitalism.
Well, I don't think they hate for-profit things. I think some of them that probably do.
Some of them hate profits.
Yeah, we probably do have communists out there. But I think if they really sat down and thought of what a profit is, I doubt very many people out there would be like, oh, that's evil, right? Because profit is just getting some sort of resource and making it better, improving it. That's all a profit is. I don't care if it's money or if it's some piece of aluminum that you mold into a statue or whatever. It's just getting A and turning it into B, where B is worth more money. That's all profit is.
Well, the good news, if there's any good news, is that the American people apparently right now are naming the government as the nation's top problem in Gallup's latest poll. According to their own website at news.gallup.com, with high prices persisting, inflation remains the second most cited problem at 15%. People that said the government was the number one problem is 21%. And illegal immigration was at number 3 at 11%.
So government and inflation combined make up just over 1 in 3 right? 36% is the number I came up with. Yep. Okay. Considering inflation is a product of government, I'm going to lump it all together, I think.
Now, what's not clear yet, at least in this story, is exactly how this question was answered, because usually when they ask questions about what's important to people, they don't limit them to just one answer, which is what it seems like they might have done here, because the total number of the responses totals up to, I'm pretty sure, 100%. Whereas in a lot of these surveys, they ask people, check yes if these are important to you, right? That way you could get, I think it's been like as many as 7 or 8 or whatever out of 10 Americans think inflation is a huge problem. But that's not being reflected here because of the way this polling was done.
I don't know. I think it's kind of more interesting this way, because now we know that that many people chose it as the number one.
The poll's January 2nd through 22 field period included a 15-vote process in which Republicans, who now hold a slim majority in the U.S. House of Representatives, ultimately elected Kevin McCarthy to be the Speaker of the House. Revelations about classified government documents found in Joe Biden's private office and home also surfaced while the poll was in the field, although mentions of the government as the nation's top problem rose 6 points this month to 21%. Job approval ratings of Biden and Congress, 41% and 21% respectively, remained flat.
21% for Congress?
That seems a little high, but yeah, that's what it says here.
Look, I don't understand this whole classified document thing going on, and I haven't been paying that much attention to it because I don't really care, but there's something fascinating going on here with the FBI not being beholden to the government or to the president. Like, who exactly is in charge here if the sitting president of the United States can't say, yeah, I'm taking these classified documents home, right?
Mm-hmm. Don't investigate me.
Yeah, there's very clearly some sort of element here that is unanswerable to these elected officials. And I don't care if you want to call it the deep state or, the military industrial complex or the prison industrial complex or the Illuminati. Masters. Yeah, or puppet masters. It's demonstrable at this point that this institution that is more powerful than the President of the United States and unaccountable to the President of the United States exists. It's there. It's going around raiding former presidents and searching the homes of the current president. And if the president's the head of the executive branch, then he's directly in charge of the FBI, or indirectly because he appoints the person in charge of it. But that's very clearly not the case. The FBI is acting independently to pursue their own boss.
They have an agenda.
Yeah. And that should terrify the hell out of everyone. Who's in charge here if it's not Joe Biden? And look, I don't want Joe Biden in charge of anything either. I don't want him in charge of tying his own shoes. But he's very clearly not in charge of the FBI. So who is?
The question apparently was specifically, what do you think is the most important problem? So yeah, this was a one-choice answer. This wasn't what all the problems are that you're concerned with. What is the most important problem? And the number one answer given, interestingly, by both Republicans and Democrats, was the government is the biggest problem facing the United States. It was 24% of Republicans gave that as the answer, and 18% of Democrats that responded gave that as the answer. So averaging out to 21%.
I mean, they're right, but I'm curious. I would like to know what their reasons are. Because I imagine they have very different reasons.
Sure. Yeah, that's probably true. Inflation at 18% of Republicans, 11% of Democrats, followed by immigration at 18%.
Those numbers would be exactly the opposite if we had a Republican president right now.
Yeah, probably true.
Their ire at inflation is not actually due to inflation. It's because they think it's Biden's fault.
Well, and the other thing about it is Democrats are... When I was holding signs from Matt Santostasso, I was hanging out with Democrat old ladies all day. They were literally saying to each other, inflation is just the cause of greedy corporations raising prices.
Yeah, they're crazy. But that is what they think, right? They think that...
You didn't correct them, I take it.
No. Mm-hmm. I mean, they were talking amongst themselves.
Yeah. Like, what are you going to say anyway?
And it's literally, those people are
They're gonna
lost
die
causes.
believing that.
Oh my God. Those 4 ladies I was hanging out with that day, I was just being nice to them because they were just complete lost causes.
Yeah. Yep.
I mean, plus, who wants to take up an argument where it's 1 versus 4, right?
Well, and plus, that's the good point that Bonnie's making here is you got to be able to pick your... not just your battles here, but your targets or your prospects, right? Like a woman in her 70s who is probably not going to be around for another decade at the best, in many cases, is not going to be the best target for your recruitment, right?
Well, she's not going to listen to any of my long-winded explanations of economics, which we'd have to go to the basics for. But I did get her on my side about one thing, and she had said she never thought about that before. Somebody came outside and was telling me I had to move my signs, and I made him show me like the actual law.
Mhm.
And eventually I moved my signs. I don't really think I was in the wrong, but I said to her when he was away, I was like, yeah, I wasn't just going to do it just because he's a government official and he says for me to do it. I mean, government officials lie. And she literally went, oh, I never thought of that before.
Wow.
I can't imagine living such a cushy, comfortable life
Yeah.
where the government has never been my enemy or, never been antagonistic toward me, that I could really believe
At age 70.
that the government, or it would just never occur to me that the government wouldn't lie. How cushy of a cops lie all the time. How can a person reach the age of 70 without knowing, oh yeah, people in government lie? They probably lie more than the average person.
Absolutely.
And you know how I got into like a conversation with her and was able to like get her on my side at all is I said something to the effect of like, she asked me not really if I was okay, but she was kind of being nice to me after like it seemed like I got yelled at. And I was just like, I'm not going to let some man tell me just because, and she was just like, yeah, you know what,
That
I
was
see what
your
you're
in.
saying, but then I also threw in the government worker part.
Nice.
See, I like that. That's good. I'm not going to let some man tell me this. Are you kidding?
Gallup also regularly tracks Americans' ratings of national economic conditions as excellent, good, only fair, or poor, as well as their views on whether the economy is getting better or worse. Currently, more than 4 in 5 U.S. adults rate economic conditions in the country as only fair, 38%, or poor, 45%, with few describing conditions as excellent, only 2%, or good, 15%. So you've got only 17% of Americans describe the economic conditions in the country as good or excellent.
I could see
Everybody
that.
else is lower.
Given that, like 60-something% of people are living paycheck to paycheck, those people, the people living paycheck to paycheck, they're not going to characterize the economy
as good
or even fair, because it's not. They're barely making ends meet. And if they have to suddenly buy a new tire, or if their alternator goes out on their car or whatever, they don't have the money to pay for it. So it's not fair to them.
There was you mentioned the people living paycheck to paycheck. There was a story in the news today about that. 64% are living paycheck to paycheck, including people making $100,000 a year.
Wow.
That's what they're saying.
Well, I don't understand. People just up their spending to whatever they're making.
That's the problem.
I won't say who, but somebody I was talking to this week who rents houses, is a landlord. He said that it wouldn't matter if everybody's money went to zero and everybody got handed the same amount of money. Those people that he rents to would be broke immediately because as soon as they see money,
they'd be broke.
They spend as much money as they have in their bank account.
In a lot of cases, I think that's true, but in the case of these people who are making $100,000 and stuff like that, I suspect a big portion of it is that the only place where they can get a job where they make that kind of money also has a very, very high standard of living.
That's a good
Or
point.
cost of living is the word I'm looking for, where they're probably paying $4,000 a month in rent, or
But they're
something
probably
like
also
that.
paying way too much for the car they drive,
Sure.
and they probably got into a house they can't afford. And that's a problem, as Bonnie points out. People do tend to spend to what they earn, and it's more of a financial intelligence problem than it is a problem with being able to make money.
Well, saving money isn't fun, right? But going out to that whatever,
the bar,
that's
or
fun.
whatever, the
And
strip
the
club.
thing is, it's not like we live in a society where money is run in a way where it's actually fair. Like you just have this sense of this just isn't fair. I shouldn't have to work every single day of my life, and I'm working till I go to sleep, and I also don't have any money to do anything fun. It's subconsciously something's up, and what's actually happening is your money's being devalued. Most
What's
people don't know
happening?
that.
Finally, here, the resulting Economic Confidence Index, which summarizes responses to the current conditions and their outlook items, has a theoretical range of plus 100 if all respondents say the economy is excellent or good and that it's getting better, to negative 100 if all say it's poor and getting worse. The latest negative 39 reading is identical to last month, but above the negative 58 score from last June. amid high gas prices and the record low of negative 72 in October of 2008 during what they're calling the Great Recession. So right now it is at a negative 39. It was last in the positive at looks like just barely in the positive in April of 2021, where it was like 2. It was 2%. Or 2, like this is not a percent, it's just like 2.
That's 2 between negative 100 and 100, though.
Correct.
So it's
so
just above average, yeah.
And then the plus 41, I don't know if you would call it average because the average would be something else. But plus 41 was the last high in the last, since 2006. The high since 2006, the high was 6. It then went down to negative 72 in the end of 2008. It sort of slowly worked its way all the way back up to plus 41 in the month of February of 2020. And then after COVID, it struck downwards to negative 33 and has been down in the negatives, only peaking up above 0 for just a couple months.
Well, my gut tells me that most people are pessimistic. And I don't know if I'm right or wrong, but I would speculate that most people are more inclined... Yeah, all things being equal, I suspect people are more inclined to say that things are bad than they are good things are good.
Well, that's certainly under the circumstances.
Regardless of the circumstances, I suspect that out of 100 people, if you all ask them their opinions about a given thing, more than half of them will have a negative opinion.
Well, the point of this survey is to say that there are times when more than half have a positive opinion, and there are times when more than half have a negative opinion.
Right.
We're in a time when more than half would have a negative opinion right now.
I'm just saying I don't think that has anything to do with the facts themselves. I think people are just pessimistic.
But if they were mostly more than half,
not all the time. I mean, it's a generalization.
Okay.
Certainly, you can find people. I mean, if things are really great, even the worst pessimist isn't going to be like, "Oh, this is terrible. I should just kill myself." Right?
All right. So you've got a story, Aria, about sort of related to this, about how people are handling things out there. Buyers are not having a good time, right? Eggs are over $5 a carton right now.
Are they? I keep seeing that, but I don't really buy a lot of eggs anymore. So aren't they like $1 a carton on average?
That's the old days.
What they used to be?
That's like a year ago.
That's only 1 year ago?
Yeah, they've gone up like 4 times in the last year or so.
Does anyone know why?
Well, they're claiming it's avian flu.
Okay.
That is supposedly devastating the supplies of fresh eggs in the United States.
Also, supposedly a egg-laying hen factory burned down recently, but I bet that didn't even happen.
Just one factory isn't gonna.
I bet that didn't even happen. I bet it was just like now people will be like, "Oh, that's why the price is going up because they don't know what inflation is." That's what the
Obviously, inflation's a factor, and the big claim is that it's avian flu. That's the other big factor.
So
and as we learned recently, there's a prohibition on importing eggs into the United States.
Of course there is. Why wouldn't there be a prohibition on one of the few things that could actually make this situation better?
Right. So you cannot. They actually literally are seizing eggs at the southern border.
Why?
Because it's
prohibited.
No, but why is it prohibited right now?
Because of competition. They don't want competition coming in from down south.
Is it expressly that, or is it because of avian flu?
You mean expressly?
Well, they would never say that. They would never say, "Oh, we don't want the competition from the Mexicans."
Well, no, that's the claim is that we don't want avian flu coming from Mexico.
That's what I was asking. Okay.
That's the excuse.
It's for health and safety.
Total BS.
Yeah. So the engine of the U.S. economy, consumer spending, is starting to sputter, according to the Wall Street Journal. Retail purchases have fallen.
Just starting? Wow.
That's what they say. Retail purchases have fallen in 3 of the past 4 months, one of which, it's worth remembering, was December.
Yeah.
So retail purchases falling in December, that's kind of
a bad sign.
Yeah. Spending on services, including rent, haircuts, and the bulk of bills, was flat in December after adjusting for inflation. The worst monthly reading in nearly a year. Sales of existing homes in the U.S. fell last year to the lowest level since 2014.
Really?
The auto industry posted its worst sales year in more than a decade. It's a stark turnaround from the second half of 2020 when Americans lifted the economy out of a pandemic downturn. When do they think the pandemic happened?
2020, I thought.
I thought it continued on until like at least mid 2021.
Yeah, that was all the propaganda was supposed to be like, it's still going on?
But they're like, in the second half of 2020, America turned the economy around, according to the Wall Street Journal.
No way.
I don't know what 2020 they experienced, but the one I saw was full of lockdowns.
There was lockdowns that whole year.
Helping the U.S. avoid what many economists worried would be a prolonged slump. Imagine lacking the self-awareness to... They're writing an article about how crappy the economy is while simultaneously saying that the U.S. managed to avoid a prolonged economic slump.
Ooh,
like, how crazy are they? The existence of this article contradicts that very statement.
Wow.
Consumers snapped up exercise bikes, televisions, and laptop computers for school children during lockdowns. When restrictions were
Well, it's
lifted...
probably just because they all got $600 and they were like, whoa, I'm rich.
Yep.
Very likely. A lot of people did buy televisions with their stimulus checks instead of cryptocurrency, as I suggested.
We suggested it.
Yep. And it's not financial advice, but if you go back and look, that if you bought $1,200 worth of Bitcoin in May of 2020, I think it was, then you're sitting nicely in the black at this point.
Yeah, wasn't there a website that was tracking it too? I don't remember what it was called.
There was a Twitter handle.
Oh, okay.
Bitcoin Stimulus, I think, was the handle. I don't remember now. When restrictions were lifted, people rushed back to their favorite restaurants and travel destinations. Again, I don't know where Wall Street Journal is getting this, but that is absolutely not what I saw. As someone who did, in fact, do a lot of traveling in 2020, especially the last half, where I went to my first ever music festival, well, my first ever big music festival that lasted more than a day, I didn't see any of this stuff.
I went to like 11 states in 2020, and I didn't see any of this stuff.
No. And people kept on spending, helped by government stimulus, flush savings accounts, and cheap credit, even as inflation picked up. I don't know what savings accounts they think Americans have. The average American lives paycheck to paycheck and has no savings.
Only 40% can have savings.
Yep. Faced with 4-decade high inflation last year, Americans outspent it. Through most of 2022, consumer spending growth exceeded price increases by about 2 percentage points. So even taking into account inflation, Americans were spending more money than ever last year in 2022. But now the forces that helped keep spending high are unwinding while inflation remains elevated. The share of monthly income America set aside for savings was 3.4% in December, down from 7.5% a year earlier, and a record high in April of 2020.
So of those people who do save, which we already know is less than half of the population, they're only saving 3 and change percent per month.
Yeah, a tiny amount of money.
Half of what it was.
You're never going to retire on at 3.4% savings.
Doesn't seem like it.
And that's down from 7.5%. 7.5% still isn't great. If you got a company match for up to 100% up to 6% or whatever, that's you could probably retire for that after 40 or 50 years. But just 7.5% of your own money, you're not retiring from that. Credit card interest rates have been rising, and Federal Reserve officials have signaled that they plan an additional 0.25 percentage point increase to the central bank's benchmark rate this week. Whatever that means. But it would bring the rate
It means the price of loans is going to go up again. And it's gone up, I believe, a record amount in the last year. They've just been raising it every single meeting that they have.
Which means it makes it harder for people out there to get loans. It raises the rate of interest on your credit card payments, and most Americans are putting a lot of stuff on their credit cards.
Raises your home loan
It makes it more difficult for you to get that. What's the buy now, pay later thing?
Layaway?
Yeah,
no, it's buy now, pay later. That's the name of the
Is that what it is?
terminology. There's companies that
like
that do it.
Klarna.
Klarna.
Yeah, it makes all of that more expensive. And it's got some neat little graphs here that, they're alarming. I can't show them to you, but they're alarming graphs. And it's not looking good.
We're going to continue here in moments.
But the United States evaded a slump.
Well, now it's going down, apparently. And if you want to comment on what you're seeing out there in the stores, on the streets with inflation and the economy, you can join us. I know I'm still seeing the help wanted, help needed signs everywhere.
Free Talk Live.
Why do you refer to someone that's a genetic anomaly as a boy pretending to be a girl, as if this was just some whim they took into their head overnight, as opposed to somebody who is actually born with a genetic problem, which means their mind and their body are mismatched?
We're not talking about the ones that have the two X and Y. We're talking about the boy who just decides.
Have you ever actually met and had a conversation with a transsexual?
No.
It would actually be really a good idea to dispel some of your ignorance before you start spouting it all over national radio like there's not enough ignorance to go around in America. Goodbye. Bye, Felicia.
Oh, man.
Free Talk Live, 7 nights a week from 7 to 10 Eastern, live on the Liberty Radio Network at LRN.FM.
Looking for a great real estate investment? Consider New Hampshire, which is ground zero for the Liberty Movement. Your first call should be to Mark Worden from Porcupine Real Estate. He's more than just a real estate agent. He's your New Hampshire concierge. Where are the best places to live? Do you want farm, city, the burbs, or forest? Do you want a duplex or multifamily building so that renters pay your mortgage? There are homes in all price ranges in New Hampshire, and Mark can help with financing too. Invest in Liberty and property. Mark Worden can help.
PorcupineRealEstate.com.
If you want to know the latest about Free Talk Live before we go on the air, all you need to decide is how you want it delivered. It's your choice. Visit news.freetalklive.com to receive our usually weekly news updates by email. Plus, we have a Twitter account at twitter.freetalklive.com, and you can follow us on the decentralized Mastodon platform at toot.freetalklive.com. So please follow us at toot.freetalklive.com and sign up for our emails at news.freetalklive.com.
You're listening to the live edition of Free Talk Live. Hour number 3 is next after the news here on the Liberty Radio Network at LRN.FM.
From Feature Story News in New York, I'm William Denslow. US Secretary of State Antony Blinken says urgent steps are needed to avoid escalating violence between Israelis and Palestinians. At least 22 people have been killed in the past week in several retaliatory attacks. Blinken, who met Israel's newly elected Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu Monday, reiterated that a two-state solution is the best way to achieve a lasting peace. Kate Fisher reports from Washington.
Secretary Blinken has a long diplomatic to-do list, including Iran and Ukraine, but efforts to calm the security situation are likely to dominate his long-planned Middle East trip. Upon landing in Israel, Mr. Blinken gave a statement saying he had arrived at a pivotal moment. On Tuesday, he'll meet the Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas in Ramallah.
The United Nations says the humanitarian situation in Afghanistan is becoming extremely concerning. The world body and its partners say millions of people are on the brink of starvation. A UN delegation met with the Taliban-led government last week. Jody Jacobs has more from UN headquarters in New York.
The ban on women working in the NGO space is exacerbating the humanitarian situation in Afghanistan, according to the United Nations. UNICEF's Omar Abdi says apart from the 6 million people close to starvation, about 875,000 children are expected to suffer from severe acute malnutrition this year alone. While the UN delegation says talks with the Taliban-led government had not yielded any immediate change to the ban on women, they did say they will revisit the matter. The UN says if not reversed, this would be catastrophic and a death blow to humanitarian programs and the people of Afghanistan. Jody Jacobs at the United Nations.
British oil company BP says global carbon emissions will drop faster than it predicted just a year ago. The firm highlighted the war in Ukraine and new legislation in the US as major factors driving the switch to green energy. Giles Gibson reports.
BP says global demand for oil will fall by 5% by 2035 and 6% for natural gas. It says Russia's invasion of Ukraine is also likely to have, quotes, long-lasting effects on the global energy system. And it believes the Inflation Reduction Act in the US, which contains massive subsidies for green tech, will accelerate the development of wind and solar power. Despite this improved outlook, though, the planet is still far behind the sorts of cuts needed to reach net zero CO2 emissions by 2050.
And a 6th police officer has been suspended in connection with the death of Tyree Nichols. 5 other officers have been fired and face murder charges. Video was released on Friday showing Nichols being beaten by police following a traffic stop in Memphis, Tennessee. From bureaus worldwide, this is FSN.
With FSN Spotlight, I'm Simon Marks, looking today at the latest developments in Afghanistan, where, as we've reported in recent weeks, efforts to get the Taliban to allow women to play a role in healthcare and humanitarian assistance are still underway. 2 UN delegations visited Kabul last week and think they secured a commitment to unveil new Taliban guidelines that could allow women back into some non-governmental workplaces. But it's unclear whether officials who made those pledges have the authority to effect change. Bob McMahon is with the US-based Council on Foreign Relations.
You take women out of the equation and you severely restrict your ability to help them. And it doesn't matter if the Taliban are able to bring battalions of men into the front lines and all these areas. It's not going to work the way it needs to work, certainly in healthcare, where the Taliban will admit women should treat women. A very high-level group of UN officials came last week, led by the Deputy Secretary General, Amina Mohammed, a woman, who was not addressed eye to eye by a number of Afghan Taliban leaders, but nevertheless got her message across. But it's not clear how much is really going to be able to happen and how much the Taliban is willing to endure or allow its people to endure before something breaks here.
There is agreement that the Taliban are at least ready to discuss the issue, but with millions of Afghans relying on assistance that in some cases has only been delivered by women, the outcome of all this remains deeply uncertain. With FSN Spotlight, I'm Simon Marks.
FSN is an independent source of news for TV, radio and digital networks worldwide. You can find more of our minute-by-minute updates on Twitter. Follow us there at Feature Story. And we have a wealth of audio and video stories from our global news bureaus on Facebook. You can find us there by following Feature Story News. Stay tuned for further updates right here. But for now, that's the latest Feature Story News. William Denslow reporting.
This is the Onion Week in Review. According to friends, colleagues, and complete strangers, anxiety-ridden man Timothy Gibula is rightly ashamed of every single thing he does, with mere acquaintances saying they're constantly judging Gibula at every moment, just as he suspects.
Tim's the kind of guy who's forever second-guessing his behavior, as if everyone's constantly scrutinizing him, and he's completely correct. We all are.
We can spend entire afternoons picking apart Tim's taste in clothing and his receding hairline. It's honestly all we do when he's not around.
Anytime he awkwardly says excuse me when he's waiting in line for milk or sugar, anytime he fails to make eye contact with me when he asks me for the Wi-Fi password. Not only do I notice these things, but I use them to judge him fundamentally as a human being.
A 3-alarm fire that tore through a family home in Newark, Delaware early Saturday morning tragically claimed a half sleeve of Oreo cookies that were trapped inside a cupboard. At the time of the blaze, the residence was occupied by Mike and Sheila Donlan, their 3 young children, and 6 delicious chocolate sandwich cookies, all half dozen of which perished in the intense heat and towering flames.
Got Telegram? You can follow our channel there and discuss show prep with other listeners at telegram.freetalklive.com. Free Talk Live.
Is Free Talk Live. We are kicking off the 3rd hour of the show. The phones are open, and you can join us here. The number is 603-283-6160. That's 603-283-6160. We're talking about some economic things. The number one most frustrating thing to the people in the United States right now, according to a Gallup poll, is 21% of Americans said it's the government. And then nice. I think it was 18% said it's inflation. About 10 or 11% said it was the economy in a more general sense. So a lot of people are frustrated with the status quo. Now, what are their solutions? Well, that's a whole other question, and then Gallup did not answer that question. But Arya, you're sharing with us a story from the Wall Street Journal that's focusing in on how people are handling things. Is that right? What's the sort of the thrust of this story? The
economy sucks, and people are starting to notice. Really,
just now starting to notice, according to the Wall Street Journal.
People are dense, man. A lot of
maybe it took the $5 a carton eggs to slap people and get their attention here. By the way, it's Ian, Bonnie, and Arya in the studio here tonight. So what else do we need to do?
I do suspect people are just now starting to really notice, or it's really just starting to sink in. Annual inflation, as measured by the Consumer Price Index, remained above 5% in December for the 19th straight month. The longest such streak since the early 1980s. And all of these numbers, this is why Americans don't care about inflation. Because you start throwing these boring, tedious numbers out there that they just don't care about. But when you say $5 for a carton of eggs, suddenly they care.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, that's probably on purpose.
I'm sure it is. Consumer spending accounts for roughly 70% of the economy. I don't know how it doesn't account for 100% of the economy, but whatever. A downshifting consumer is a key reason that business and academic economists polled by the Wall Street Journal, on average...
Are they including like government spending and like companies spending?
It doesn't say.
I mean, because like that would be irrelevant to the price of living as a consumer, so it doesn't make any sense.
Are you talking about the 70% number?
Yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't say. It just says that 70% of the economy is consumer spending. So the average person is putting the probability of a recession in the next 12 months at 61%.
What the hell do they know?
Yeah, I would suggest the number is 100% because we are, in fact, in a recession, and we have been
by
for
the old
several
definition
months.
of it, yes.
Well, by any definition that isn't completely insane, I would argue that we are demonstrably in a recession.
If the average person is just now figuring, if we're to believe the Wall Street Journal, and I have no reason to believe them about this, but if the average person is just now taking note of inflation, then they're going to be way behind the ball as far as knowing whether or not a recession is coming.
Good point. One factor making forecasting more difficult while unemployment is trending at a half-century low. Big companies, including Amazon, Goldman Sachs, and Microsoft.
How in the hell can that be possible?
Man. They say, I know, that was my first thought too, because all I see everywhere are help wanted signs.
Right across from the courthouse in Concord, there's this little Italian restaurant that, everybody in the courthouse goes to because you only get 45 minutes or an hour for lunch and you don't have time to go get in a car and drive downtown and then park and then get out and then go and get a table or whatever. You have no time to eat anywhere else. So this is the place where everybody goes if they're in the courthouse. It's actually pretty good. Yeah, it's not bad.
But 45 minutes is barely enough time to sit down and order and eat.
It's not. I actually had to send, when I was on trial, I had to send Bonnie out a half hour early so she could go in, get a table, get an order in. That way, when I finally got there, I only had to wait like 10 minutes before the food came out.
Actually, I had to go outside, then go to the car up the street, unlock it, and get our money out, and then go all the way back. It was just so ridiculous.
A huge hassle.
Yeah.
But I bring them up because on the sign, on the marquee out in front of the restaurant, it says cooks needed. That is different than help wanted. It used to say help needed on the sign. During my trial, it said help needed. They then changed it to cooks needed. So they are so desperate for help, they're using the term need instead of want, right? Like there's a level of
I've never
desperation.
seen that in a place.
Yeah, me neither. But it does suggest like that's how bad. Like if you can cook an egg, like they're going to train you on how to cook the rest of that stuff because they need someone who can just show up on time and can actually like not call out and be a total loser.
Well, you're not going to find that, man.
That's the thing. They're not finding it.
The rate of people calling out, and I've heard that it's probably always been like this, but I don't know, man. The rate of people calling out and being late and stuff.
It's worse now?
I don't know if it's worse now because, I don't really have anything to compare it to.
Well, you were managerial before COVID, weren't you?
Yeah, but I don't pay attention to that kind of crap. And the only reason I do now is because it affects me more than it did then. But I still don't tend to pay attention to how often people call out or not. If they call out at my shift, then yeah, I make a mental note of it. Okay. But I don't pay attention to, this person called out 4 times last month or whatever, because I don't care. If you want to call out from work, that's generally your business, not mine. I would just like to remind all of these people, though, that you're not screwing over the company or the CEOs or whatever when you call out of your place of employment. You're just screwing over your coworkers. All the work is still
going to pick up the slack.
Yeah, all of the work is still going to get done. They don't just get to leave jobs unfinished because someone called out. No, they have to work hard to make up that difference. You're not screwing over anyone except your fellow workers. So if you're communist out there talking about just call out whenever you want, screw the man, well, you're not screwing over the man. The man's going to make sure that the job gets done. And your coworkers, the people whose side you're supposed to be on.
Unless everybody calls out, then the business is going to go out of business and you'll never go back there again.
Right, but that's not very likely either. The last bastion of strength is the labor market, but I don't think it can withstand all these other forces, said Nationwide Chief Economist Kathy Bonsjankic. I don't know what the hell is that name. And what forces? They didn't specify any forces that the labor market has to withstand. They have not specified a single force that they're talking about.
I guess it's the force of people not wanting to work in this case. And I remember one of the theories before, because we've been wondering aloud about why people aren't working.
People have always said that no one wants to work. I mean, there are newspapers from like 1920 of
yeah, but they
owners
wasn't
saying,
true. That's not true. Like,
it's not true now either.
No, but before it is definitely true now. People do not want to work right now for whatever reason. That's why they're not working.
I don't think it's any more true now than it was, when people were saying it in the 20s or whatever.
Well, I don't know what it was like in the 20s or the 1920s because I wasn't alive back then. But I know that just several years ago, it was a employer's market because people were desperately competing for jobs, and it wasn't as easy to find work. Just several years ago, we still have the Holland Cook, what were they called? Survival speech. Yeah. So I'm still airing them just because it's still good advice. But the survival speech, if you listen to our online streams at freetalklive.com during occasionally during a commercial, you'll hear survival speech. It's like these little tips, these minute-long tips at, how to best present yourself to get a job and things like that. And when he wrote those, it was written at a time when you needed to do everything you could to best the competition to get a job. Because there were more people applying for jobs than there were jobs to fill.
Right.
The opposite is true now.
Yes, and I'm very happy about that because, the minimum wage, it creates unemployment, and which means it creates more people than there are jobs, which makes you and I, the average person out there, have to compete with one another to get those jobs. But it stands to reason that you could have the opposite, where there are too many jobs and not enough people to actually fulfill them. And I didn't think this was possible in any realistic sense. I didn't think not unemployment, but the opposite of unemployment would ever actually exist. But for some reason, it does now. There are too many jobs and there aren't enough people to work them as far as we can tell, which means that companies, for the first time in my entire life, have to compete with one another.
Yeah, and they've been lowering, which is great for the person looking for work. They're lowering their standards. They're making it so you don't need a college degree anymore. And many of the jobs you previously needed a college degree, you don't anymore.
Yep. I remember the first really shocking sign that went up in Keene and that we were all talking about was Wendy's put up a sign like last year, a year and a half ago that said, hiring all positions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and they're not the only ones.
Sounds like nobody's in the building.
It was so bad that they actually had to close down for portions of the day.
Yep. Yeah. Many places have closed. McDonald's has, I'm not a big fan of McDonald's, but they used to be 24 hours here in Keene. They're not now. And there are some days where they, not much so recently as I understand it, but there were some days where they didn't even open. A McDonald's not opening
it's
on some day.
Yeah.
But now it's back in, when I started looking for jobs 6 years ago or whatever, you sit down and the employee goes, well, what do you have to offer us?
Yeah.
Well, now you are asking that to the employer.
Right. Yeah. What do you have that's going to make you a better option than the 20 other places with a help wanted sign out down the street?
Yep. And a lot of them don't have an answer, but they're being forced now to come up with answers, and it's a good thing for the people out there who want employment.
It is, but we still don't know why.
I was going to say, I'm still confused about what changed.
I don't know.
I heard somebody speculate that immigration is down for whatever reason. Maybe it's due to the COVID regulations and stuff. Like a lot of people who had come here for temporary jobs. Because remember, Bonnie, we were at a restaurant out in the Seacoast area, this Mexican place, and there was this guy that was working there from Peru.
It was the Lakes region. It was.
Oh yeah, thank you. Yeah, the Lakes region. But Laconia. That he was there from Peru, and he came up, for part of the year to work, and part of the rest of the year he was in Miami, and then part of the other rest of the year he was down in Peru. And so he's one of these migrant workers that they just come to the United States for part of the year, make some money, and bring it back to their family down south. The suggestion, I believe it was Jay Freeville in our chat that had made this one, was that the market was clamping down on those things because it's harder to migrate because of all the COVID restrictions. So many of those people just aren't coming here, and they're filling they would normally fill those jobs, and right now they're just not. I don't know if that's true, but it's an interesting theory.
It is an interesting theory. I mean, Trump and Biden have made it harder to immigrate to America legally.
Yeah,
I'm sure it's certainly a factor. It may not be one of the biggest factors or the biggest factor, but it's got to be a factor, right?
But how they can say that unemployment is at such low levels, I just don't even understand that.
I don't either.
And I just started recording it in a different way.
Well, and I understand that in order to be quote unquote unemployed, you have to be, I think, looking for work, right? I
don't think that accounts for it though.
But the people who aren't looking for work aren't counted as unemployed.
Right. So I still don't think that accounts for what we're seeing on the streets, though, which is just more jobs than there are people.
Well, that's definitely true. We know that that's happening. We can see that. But as far as the number of unemployment, if it's like, well, it's a record low unemployment rate. Well, we know there's plenty of jobs that are available, but that's not what they're calculating. They're only calculating, as I understand it, the people who are seeking employment. So if you're just like total welfare queen, you're like, screw this, I'm going to live on my parents' dime for the rest of my life, you're not actually an unemployed person, according to the statistics.
Another thing is, like, think about all the people that had to quit their jobs, especially in the medical field.
Mm-hmm.
They're just not going back.
Can't say that I blame them.
Right.
Yeah, but don't they have mouths to feed? Don't they have, like, kids at home? Don't they have to take care of themselves?
Maybe, but recent layoff trends worry Benjamin DeLong, a 32-year-old customer account manager at an industrial manufacturer. His savings rose to $3,700 during the pandemic, thanks in part to government stimulus, but he's now down to about 3 cents.
Oh, my God.
So he's liquidated $3,700 of his savings, his entire savings. Maybe that's what a lot of these people have done, is they just relied on their savings. And maybe that's what they're doing right now. I tend to think that's not the case.
$3,000 isn't even going to pay the rent for 6 months.
No, and most people don't have savings, so right. I don't know if that's a factor or not. But
by the way, the Bitcoin
like
stimulus, we did this off the air. We didn't say what it was on the air. You had mentioned that when the $1,200 so-called stimulus check came out in 2020 in April, we had suggested that people buy cryptocurrency, Bitcoin, for instance, with that. And if you did, if you at the time spent all $1,200 on Bitcoin and you held on to it, you didn't sell the Bitcoin between then and now, it would be worth over $4,000 today.
More than 3 times.
Yeah.
An increase in value.
And it would have already passed the highest Bitcoin's ever been, so if you would have, like,
you could have sold at the top if you knew when, which you never do.
Right. I'm just saying, it got even higher at some point.
This guy only had $3,000 in savings. Had he put the $1,200 that he got into the Bitcoin, he'd have
he would have more than that still, yeah. Really good point.
Yeah.
Mr. DeLong said he had to dip into his savings to cover the rising costs of his groceries, utilities, and car insurance.
There you go.
He has found,
not to mention rent. A lot of people's rent's gone up 30-40% in 1 year to the next.
Well, you can cut out some of your groceries, I'm sure, by buying, generic brands or whatever. Maybe you can't. You can cut out your car insurance, certainly. Just don't do it. Maybe your state requires you to have it because, they're facilitating the exchange of wealth into the hands of insurance companies. But if you don't absolutely have to buy car insurance, you'll probably be just fine without it.
If you're going generic buying groceries, I mean, that's always a good plan if you need to save a little bit of money. But now you're just going to be spending as much as you used to on generics. You're going to spend as much as you used to on brand names on generics because the price of the generics is going up too.
Right, but you may get more food now because now you're buying generics instead of the name brands.
Yes, but it's still going to cost you.
Right. He has found some relief in his grocery bill since he and his partner decided last year to purchase some pigs jointly with other families to be raised on a relative's farm. That's curious. How much pig do you eat, man, that buying some
You usually
pigs?
get a lot of pig when you go in with somebody else.
Yeah, I was actually talking to Jay Noon about it, and he thinks I only need half a pig.
That would literally fill that whole freezer.
Yeah, I guess so.
Half a pig?
The problem is...
I didn't think it'd be
too
that
much. It's too much, I think.
Pigs aren't that big. I mean, they're big, but like...
Yeah, they're big, and they will make a lot of cuts of meat. I wouldn't want to hold on to that much meat because if the electricity goes out, then your freezer's everything in there's gonna spoil.
Their portion of meat yielded nearly 150 pounds, saving them about $500 on groceries, Mr. DeLong estimated. Okay. I mean, I guess he experienced it. He lived it, so he saved money by buying pigs, but it seems like I have to imagine they spent more than $500 in labor and stuff just to make all of this happen, but I don't know. The possibilities...
You will spend more typically on a local farm than you will at the grocery store.
Right, but you're spending
production
for more nutrition.
But purportedly it's better, yeah.
Yeah, but they don't have the money for better, right? If they could, they'd be eating organic or whatever, but they don't have the money for that.
Yeah, but if you're buying a local... You don't just get a pig from, the grocery store.
Right.
He's getting it from a co-op or something like that, so it's got to be coming local. It's got to be more expensive. I don't know how he's saying he's saving money.
Well, he said he went in with some other families, so maybe somehow
Yeah,
with all of them
he
pulling
and
it.
some other families purchased some pigs, and they're raising them on a relative's farm. So he's like half rancher in his spare time.
Mm-hmm.
Which also costs time.
Right. The possibility of layoffs, he said, is part of the crunch that I'm having to consider now. What's going to happen if I no longer have an income? So far, jobs have remained plentiful and wages continue to rise in the face of Federal Reserve tightening. Unemployment was a low 3.5% in December.
The wages aren't rising because the Federal Reserve is quote-unquote tightening. The wages are rising because of inflation, and these companies have to offer more in order to attract people to work for them.
Hourly wages were up a robust 4.6% year over year. But look at how much inflation was up year over year.
Yeah.
And you'll see that, what was the inflation number last month, like 8% or something?
No, it's quote-unquote down to like
The rate it's
6,
rising. The
5 and change.
currency is inflating is going down, not the actual inflation.
Correct, yeah.
And at
Inflation
any
is
rate,
still going up.
It's still above 4.6%.
It is.
So you're making less money now. You're spending more money than you were a year ago, even if your wages have gone up.
You always have to remember, even if wages have gone up 4 to 6%, they always trail the inflation. So inflation keeps on running, and then maybe you'll get a wage increase 6 months or a year down the road, and then you're still behind the ball.
There were about 10.5 million unfilled jobs available in November. That's a metric I like. Don't tell me the unemployment numbers anymore. Tell me the unfilled jobs number.
That's amazing. What was it? 10.5 million.
Yeah. Households had a ton of comfort they don't normally have about their job prospects, said Marion Wanamaker. They knew they could get a job tomorrow if they wanted to, and that remains mostly true. Still, there are signs of labor market weakness. Employers are shedding temporary workers at a fast rate, and people who lose their jobs are taking longer to find new ones. Meanwhile, the number of hours worked a week has declined for 2 straight months, according to the Labor Department, resulting in a slowdown in workers' take-home pay. So people are also making less money.
How can people simultaneously say that, oh, I know I can get a new job tomorrow, and also be like, I had to take the vaccine because I would have lost my job?
Well, maybe they couldn't get a new job tomorrow then, or maybe they didn't think they could. I mean, this has been a 3-year process of watching it happen, and the unemployment signs, it wasn't the case just overnight that suddenly you could go into anywhere and get a new job, right?
I don't know. I remember during 2020 on Free Talk Live, there was all this talk about like where are the jobs going? Oh, they're probably just going off and taking the $600 a week unemployment. That's where all the people are going for jobs.
A lot of people were, yeah.
There was already like a lot of people who wanted to hire people that had no one that wanted to work for them back in 2020, and the vaccine started rolling out in 2021. It's just that I was talking about this conversation with somebody at the State House the other day. I was just like, I never understood being like, oh, I cannot lose my job. But maybe it's because I purposely never wanted to work anything that wasn't like entry level, so I could quit it if it was inconveniencing me.
Yeah, seniority and pay wage increases. I mean, sure, I could quit my job tonight, and I can certainly find another job tomorrow doing whatever. But I won't have the seniority. I won't have the benefits. I won't make as much money, and I won't have the guaranteed hours.
Yeah, sure.
I can work as many hours as I want at my current job. They're never going to tell me, hey, you've worked too many hours. You need to go home, right? I can work 110 hours a week if I want to. I can't do that if I just quit my job and let's go to McDonald's. So sure, technically, I could find another job tomorrow. I have no doubt that I could, but it's not going to be as good.
Yeah, you wouldn't have the relationships.
Right, and there's always going to be some sort of trade-off, right? And maybe if they'd be like, okay, well, you got to get the vaccine if you want to keep your job, maybe at that point it becomes worth it to go find a different job if they don't also have that requirement. But because of all of those relationships that I've established and the fact that I've been there for so long anyway, that little quote requirement never came into existence. And if it did, it was just going to get swept right under that rug anyway, where everyone just assumed I was vaccinated and I never actually had to be.
Nice.
Which is how it ended up playing out anyway. No one's ever asked me if I'm vaccinated. Everyone just either assumes that I am, or they know that I'm not, so they purposely don't ask me the question.
Yeah. What you don't know can't hurt you.
Right. In mid-November of last year, Mr. Anderson, and he's the owner of First Class Tattoo, blah, blah, blah. He started getting calls from clients who had booked day-long tattoo sessions, saying they could only afford shorter ones or were pulling out altogether. Mr. Anderson specializes in tattoo projects that often take 5 or 6 all-day sessions to complete. Good Lord. Had 15 cancellations for full-day slots in December.
Damn.
That's more along the lines of what I would expect.
That's brutal.
Well, yeah, but what do you want done to your body that is worth an all-day tattoo session in the first place?
I don't. You know how tattoo people are. I mean, a lot of them are like totally hooked on it. Like they just keep on getting them. As long as they got a spare inch, they're gonna get a tattoo.
I guess, but there's better ways. Look, if you want to make daddy angry, just date a black dude or something. That'll
look,
do it.
This is the way he makes his money, and he lost 15. That's half a month. Yeah. That's half a month's worth of bookings, presuming he works all 30 days a month. So it's probably more than half. He's only working 5 days a week.
Yeah, he's saying people calling up. This is in 15 years. I've never seen this. They don't have the money to spend right now.
Well, that's like a luxury thing.
Right.
You know, if you're
that's what people are going to cut.
Yeah, if you're poor, you're not going off and getting a tattoo unless you're just really dumb.
They're cutting the luxury things, and because they still got to buy food. There's more coming up here. I mean, do you want the eggs or do you want a tattoo? You can join us here, 603-283-6160. It is Free Talk Live.
Hey, you are going to love the movie Victimless Crime Spree. It's hilarious, heartwarming, and carries a ton of inspiring freedom messages. Feeling down about the lack of liberty in your life? You need to put on this film with some friends and have a good laugh. It's a true story about me and my friends in New Hampshire living free, singing, dancing, and getting arrested. Of course, it's all on video, and the bad guys, the cops, judges, bailiffs, and sheriffs, they all play their part like it's out of a movie or something. You would think we scripted the whole thing, but it's real life. Go ahead and have a watch, and if it's been a while, have another look. I guarantee you'll notice things now that you didn't notice before. And the best part is that you're going to walk away feeling a renewed sense of your own power. You are the master of your destiny, and you will be free in your lifetime. Victimless Crime Spree.
From Feature Story News in New York, I'm William Denslow. US Secretary of State Antony Blinken says urgent steps are needed to avoid escalating violence between Israelis and Palestinians. At least 22 people have been killed in the past week in several retaliatory attacks. Blinken, who met Israel's newly elected Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu Monday, reiterated that a two-state solution is the best way to achieve a lasting peace. Kate Fisher reports from Washington.
Secretary Blinken has a long diplomatic to-do list, including Iran and Ukraine, but efforts to calm the security situation are likely to dominate his long-planned Middle East trip. Upon landing in Israel, Mr. Blinken gave a statement saying he had arrived at a pivotal moment. On Tuesday, he'll meet the Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas in Ramallah.
The United Nations says the humanitarian situation in Afghanistan is becoming extremely concerning. The world body and its partners say millions of people are on the brink of starvation. A UN delegation met with the Taliban-led government last week. Jody Jacobs has more from UN headquarters in New York.
The ban on women working in the NGO space is exacerbating the humanitarian situation in Afghanistan, according to the United Nations. UNICEF's Omar Abdi says apart from the 6 million people close to starvation, about 875,000 children are expected to suffer from severe acute malnutrition this year alone. While the UN delegation says talks with the Taliban-led government had not yielded any immediate change to the ban on women, they did say they will revisit the matter. The UN says if not reversed, this would be catastrophic and a death blow to humanitarian programs and the people of Afghanistan. Jody Jacobs at the United Nations.
British oil company BP says global carbon emissions will drop faster than it predicted just a year ago. The firm highlighted the war in Ukraine and new legislation in the US as major factors driving the switch to green energy. Giles Gibson reports.
BP says global demand for oil will fall by 5% by 2035 and 6% for natural gas. It says Russia's invasion of Ukraine is also likely to have, quotes, long-lasting effects on the global energy system. And it believes the Inflation Reduction Act in the US, which contains massive subsidies for green tech, will accelerate the development of wind and solar power. Despite this improved outlook, though, the planet is still far behind the sorts of cuts needed to reach net zero CO2 emissions by 2050.
And a sixth police officer has been suspended in connection with the death of Tyree Nichols. 5 other officers have been fired and face murder charges. Video was released on Friday showing Nichols being beaten by police following a traffic stop in Memphis, Tennessee. From bureaus worldwide, this is FSN.
Our Matrix server is about as free as internet chat can be. Join the existing rooms or create your own at chat.freetalklive.com.
It is Free Talk Live, and you can join the show here even now. There's plenty of time for you if you dial in at 603-283-6160. That's 603-283-6160. You can join us online. Just head over to freetalklive.com and enjoy the features that we have there for you. Once again, that is freetalklive.com. Here tonight, it's Ian.
It's Bonnie.
And Aria.
Whether you want to comment on the economy or whatever happens to be on your mind, we also discussed the library case a lot earlier in the show tonight. Bonnie does have a story about apparently a judge committing suicide in a little bit. We can share that with you as well. And don't forget, you can join us online anytime. We do have our own social media platform. We run it. It's open source. It's self-hosted. It is a Mastodon system. We've apparently run into some troubles doing the upgrade. There was supposed to be an upgrade done last week. I don't know when it'll be done when it's done. We do know the upgrade is available. I'm looking forward to seeing if it adds any decent features to the back end, because I'm so tired of getting these reports from all these wussies on these other Mastodon servers that just can't handle freedom of speech like we have on our servers. So they'll report one of our users for something that our users said, and it's just like, we don't care what we don't care that you don't like our users. You know?
I mean, there's a block button. Yeah, that's
Right.
what I don't understand. I have like at least 2 people blocked on there.
One of the reports we got was so obviously bad. It was like, this person keeps interacting with me despite my request for them not to interact. I'm like, dude, just
hit the block
yeah,
button.
instead of tagging in an admin to block the person for you and get them, freaking removed from the platform, just click the block button.
But the worst thing is, we're saying this on the radio, but we can't tell the person who reported this because it doesn't tell us who it is. It just says someone from the server that the someone is on. Because remember, Mastodon is decentralized, so there's like thousands of Mastodon servers. So we can identify the server, but if there's like 200 people or 2,000 people on that server, we don't know who it was that actually made the report. Nope. So it's like the least transparent form of reporting system. If we had the name of the person who was giving the report, I would take the time to go tell that person to cut it out and use the block. Don't be such a pussy and use the block button. Learn how this works.
I think I'd be a little nicer than that. I would hope.
Maybe I get a little more frustrated as they continued to report.
Good point, yeah.
But anyway, I'm hoping the new version has better features, but I have no expectation that it will, because the problem with Mastodon is it's programmed by a bunch of commies out in Europe, or a bunch of socialists, or whatever.
Which is fine, because they allow us to have our, little anarcho-capitalist...
Well, they can't stop us.
True.
So, like, when Gab went on the Mastodon, they had an S-fit about it, but they couldn't stop Gab because it is an open source project.
Just disfederate from them.
They did.
If that's what you want.
They did. And some of them have disfederated from our server.
And I'm heartbroken about it.
Check it out at social.freetalklive.com. Let's go to the phones here. Ricky is on the line in Pennsylvania, a.k.a. Ricky from the Commonwealth.
That is me, Brother Ian. Thank you very much.
Dude, how long has it been? Like 5 years since you've called this show?
I believe so.
What has been happening to you? I mean, there's all kinds of theories about what happened to you. Like,
oh, do tell. I'd love to hear a little bit.
I don't know. There was just it's been so long since I've heard the theories. I mean, it's been 5 years since you've called in.
Yeah, we had a Discord server then, so I mean, we'd have to look on there for those, but that got nuked,
deleted.
So we can't.
Yeah. So what's been going on, man? What happened to you?
Long story, Brother Ian. It's too long, probably.
Weren't you like wearing a Confederate flag or something like that? What was the last thing you called about it? Was something you were doing something on like the city bus, or I don't even remember what it was.
Yeah, actually, that was. There was a problem with wearing my Confederate flag.
Okay, I remembered it. Okay, very good.
That was the end. Yeah.
Yeah, I think some
But,
people
I
thought
read
something
this a
happened to
lot.
you over that. Like there was somebody thought you might have gotten in a fight on the bus system or something over your flag.
Well, not to that extent.
Okay,
but,
well, that's good.
Yeah, I can't get away with that no more. It's very disappointing. I cringe every time I hear people say that it's a traitorous flag, and I'm like, how can it be a traitorous flag when the battle flag in North Virginia how can it be traitorous when you're doing something you're allowed to do?
Right.
Well, it was treasonous to the United States government. I mean, that was the whole point.
Excuse me?
The whole point of the rebellion, the Confederacy, was to be traitorous to the United States government. That was like literally the point.
I don't know. I don't know if that's true because being a traitor isn't just saying, "Hey, I'm out."
It's not a death pact. It's not a death pact, Miss Aria.
Well, that makes them a traitor, though. If you're like, okay, look, I'm.
No, you're not stabbing him in the back.
Yeah, a traitor is when you provide comfort to the enemy
Whoa. They went through the process as it's described in the Constitution. They got their signatures. They sent their damn letter. So the legislature of South Carolina voted. They blew it away, and that was it.
Look, I'm not saying they were in the wrong.
There is no process in the Constitution, by the way. Ricky, there is no process in the Constitution for leaving the United States, which is why you can leave the United States without having to ask permission. You don't have to get any signatures and present them to the federal government. You can just declare independence.
The traitor was Lincoln. Traitor against humanity.
That's a good point. Go ahead.
Brother Ian, it is described where it even goes into there's a line where it says the process is you have to secede as a whole.
No.
You can't do it in part like New York City wants to do for New York
What's the
State.
section?
Oh, I don't know.
It's because it's not in there. It's not in there.
It is there. Believe
No,
me.
dude, I'm not going to believe you because we've reached this recently when New Hampshire, I know maybe you haven't been listening for the last 5 years, but last
Maybe
year,
not.
New Hampshire had the proposal that could have gone onto the ballot had the state reps voted for it, but that sadly most of them didn't. But we would have declared peaceful independence from the United States, and the reason why we can do that without having to ask permission is because there's nothing in the Constitution that explains how to leave. It's left up to the states via the 10th Amendment.
Well, it's interesting you say that because there was an incident at the time of Jefferson when he was president, when Virginia wanted to leave, and there was a back and forth between the letters. And originally Jefferson was saying, nah, you don't want to do that, you don't want to do that, nah. But on the last letter, he says, in his words, do what you must. Now, Virginia didn't do that ultimately at that time. It wouldn't be for like another 60 years, But it shows that this is not new. And I think people should be able to leave like Texas. Texas wants to leave, let them leave.
I saw somebody made a great point today. I don't know how old this makes them, but they said when they were born, there were only 48 states in the Union. And I had to look it up because I was like, when were Alaska and Hawaii put in again? Like, how old will that make him? And it was 1959. So, there are people living today that were alive when there were 48 states in the Union. It's not like 50 is set in stone,
Well, actually, if I may, Miss Bonnie,
Mm-hmm.
there's actually, in the reality, there's only 46 states. There's 4 commonwealths.
Oh, what are the 4 commonwealths?
Virginia?
Massachusetts, Kentucky, Virginia,
and Pennsylvania.
I didn't know Kentucky.
What is the difference between a state and a commonwealth?
Well, simply put, if you look at it in the dictionary, it goes back to exactly the early part of our government. A state is something with a very strong central government, and then you have a commonwealth is a territory that is, or if you will, in our case, ratified, that is of the people, for the people, by the people, where the power's in the people.
It's the exact same thing, just with a bunch of BS malarkey surrounding it. I mean, look, the state of Massachusetts isn't some low power state run by the people. It's a total tyrannical despotism.
Well, that's Massachusetts' problem, and part of the reason is the way they handle their courts. That's one of their biggest problems. There's a big difference between Massachusetts and Pennsylvania. Now, our closest sister would be Virginia, and that's been that way since the beginning of this country.
But doesn't Pennsylvania and Virginia, don't they have the same problems of an overgrown tyrannical state as, Massachusetts?
No, that brings me to something that I was going to get into.
See, I didn't know we had,
Virginia. You can't even have a you can't even have a radar detector in Virginia, and Philadelphia is so nasty.
I'm very lucky to be in PA. Good example. Look at Governor Shapiro, our new governor.
I have no idea who that is.
We have this thing between him and Mastriano, that Christian nationalist.
All names I don't have any recognition of. All I know is liberty-minded activists like Derek J. escaped Jeremy Kaufman, who we spoke about in the first hour and a half of the show, the founder of Library. He escaped from Philadelphia as well.
Well, Philly's like its own little world, So.
It's part of Pennsylvania, isn't it?
It is. But,
and I've always heard that it's more expensive to live in a Commonwealth because they take more taxes from you. Is that true?
That's not true. Like, for example, when I pay my cell phone bill, all I got to pay is 6 cents sales tax. I don't have to pay tax on food. I don't have to pay tax on clothing. So
I pay no sales tax.
That way.
Yeah, we live in New Hampshire. There's no clothing or food tax here, unless it's prepared food.
Yes. Which is great, and it should be that.
But we're not a Commonwealth.
Is there a prepared food tax in Pennsylvania, meaning that if you go to a restaurant, is there a tax on the bill there?
That's a good question. Actually, they were trying to do that for a while. Do they still do it?
Well, if they have a sales tax, then by definition they do, right?
Huh?
If they have a sales tax, then by definition they have a tax on prepared food.
Well, I don't actually get one when I go to a restaurant. Like if I go to
you pay a sales tax, right?
I know that. I pay a sales tax, yes.
What's the sales
that's a
tax?
tax on prepared food.
What's the 6%. Sales tax in 6%?
6% on non-food or clothing items.
Mm-hmm.
So if it's not lower taxes that separate a commonwealth from a state, and it's not the unoverbearingness of their government, then what, again, is it that separates a commonwealth from a state?
Well, there are a lot of similarities in Pennsylvania and New Hampshire. Ian pointed that out, and there is. The way we handle the right to bear arms, as an example.
Right, but it sounds like there is no difference, and
there
you're
is
just
no
inventing.
difference. It's just nonsense.
Do you have constitutional carry in Pennsylvania?
Not yet. we do have open carry.
Really? Without a license?
Yes, and you don't have to register at PA anyway.
Wow, I'm surprised.
In fact, it's illegal for the law enforcement to keep a registry.
So, were you calling about any specific reason tonight, Ricky, or just calling to check in and say hi?
I was going to talk about the madness that has become the Republican Party, something I've never seen, but I don't know if I have time, brother.
Yeah, you got time. What about the Republican Party?
Well, I've seen things like I've never seen before. After the Trump years, I'm watching what happened in this new election, 2022, the midterms. I see things like I've never seen before. First of all, I can't see a party that could do more things wrong than these guys did. Number one.
Can you give us an example?
Okay. There are 3 topics. Let's see. Anti-abortion, lowering taxes, and tough on crime. Now, all of that was a lie. Just judging by their first week as they took over from the House after that spineless jackass, Kevin McCarthy, I don't want to call him speaker, he don't deserve it, took over. But,
So you're saying you don't believe the Republicans are going to lower taxes?
Oh, I know they're not, because they are.
Was there a time when you actually did think they would?
No. Not my lifetime.
Yeah. Okay. I'm with you.
But
they're liars.
They're the worst. They're the worst.
Well, the Democrats are bad, too. They also lie.
Oh, but dude, to no extent, brother Ian. I've never seen anything like these guys. You got guys like running like Herschel Walker as an example. You got you got Trump, and an answer to him is he's still a criminal. To answer your question, Sister Aria, you see, the problem with Trump is he took all this stuff, 325 classified documents, thousands of other documents, and then a bunch of file folders. They say top secret because he says they were a cool keepsake. And there's a problem with this. They're not his damn documents. They belong to the American people. A year went by.
Well, isn't he one of the American people?
Huh?
Isn't he one of the American people? Why shouldn't he be able to have a copy?
Because they belong to all of us, not him.
Well, they're copies. You can get them somewhere else.
Let me make a copy. A copying isn't theft, right?
when you just take stuff without any authorization.
Well,
yeah.
he just took a copy of it.
Surely they aren't the only copy. I mean, it's government. You know they got to have forms in triplicate at least.
Well, they probably do, but nobody's even aware of this, you know?
I just don't
could've
care.
done something.
Who cares about
He could've said-
their dumb copies of their stupid laws
If it's
or whatever
classified, doesn't that
filings they
mean
have?
by definition that they're keeping it secret from all of us? So how does it belong to all of us?
Well, it's classified information, but technically it's our information because we pay them. That's
Right,
what
it's
it
like
is.
Well,
all
what about
the
when
rooms in the...
When Edward Snowden came out with some classified information that was supposed to belong to all of us, they got mad and, tried to put him in jail.
Yeah, they still would if they had the chance to get their hands on them. It's like, Bunny, it's like all the rooms in City Hall that you can't go into, but yet you're forced to pay for. They're your rooms. You just have no access to them and no control over them.
And no ownership claim of them.
The people that work in there don't want to answer any of your questions and will call security if you ask them what their name is.
In the same way, the Commonwealth is your government. You're just not part of it.
Well, actually, the good news is I really am part of it.
Are you working for them?
No, but I mean, as far as electing our officials and getting rid of them, that we do very well here. You know,
could have fooled me.
What if you voted for someone who lost?
Yeah, and when we do our referendums, the stuff goes.
Swapping out one bureaucrat for another doesn't seem to me to be worth bragging about.
I'm pretty sure it's possible to live your entire life in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania and everybody you have ever voted for lost. So then, are you not part of the Commonwealth?
Well, no. What do you mean? Should you repeat that?
If everyone you ever voted for lost and didn't get elected, does that still make you part of the Commonwealth because you're voting, even though everyone you voted for lost?
Well, of course it does. Your say matters as much. Like I'm going to be calling a few officials in the future. I'm going to be calling Governor Shapiro. I already know his answer on this. I'm going to call Matthew Cartwright, the U.S. representative.
You know what? It really bugs me. People dropping names. I don't know who these people are, and I don't care who they are.
Well, they're members of the government. And the reason why...
I thought you were a member of the government.
No.
Oh, okay. So there is a difference between you and the government.
Of course there is. I'm not a member.
So you're not part of the government?
No.
Okay.
How do you feel about Pennsylvania voting in that dead guy this year?
What dead guy?
I thought that...
Was
remember
that Pennsylvania?
It wasn't Pennsylvania?
I don't know where it was.
I thought that happened.
No, that wasn't here, sweetheart. I don't think so.
I'm just happy we established that you recognize that you are, in fact, not the government and that the government is an entity that is distinct and separate from you. And, I don't know, do you think they rule over you?
No.
Oh.
Here's the thing. They're here basically, in Pennsylvania, they're here to serve us. They really operate that way. Because if they don't last. They get voted out. I know. I've been here long enough.
Yeah, it was Pennsylvania.
Oh, my God.
That voted in a dead guy. His name was Anthony DeLuca. He was dead for a month before he got elected.
Pennsylvania, by the way, has a $45.2 billion state budget, which is up from 40 and change billion in 2021. So the state budget sure does keep increasing over there. It doesn't seem like they're concerned with the size of government at all. They're making the government bigger there. That must be what the people want, right, Ricky?
Well, I mean, the fact of the matter is there is one good positive, at least that happened lately. For the first time that I've been around anyways, there's actually a Democratic legislature by one seat.
This is a good thing?
Yeah, because I'd like to see recreational weed come to PA, and that's what my folks...
Y'all don't even have that yet?
Yeah, for some reason I thought that
Jeez.
Pennsylvania
No,
had that.
we got medical. The problem is the Republican legislature. They couldn't even bring it to the floor.
Well, I thought the Commonwealth means that the people get what they want.
They do. There was a vote on medical. We got that.
But
that doesn't help.
Medical.
That doesn't help everybody.
Has there been any polling on the people of the Commonwealth to find out if they want recreational marijuana?
Officially, not that I've heard, no.
You just aren't paying attention. I guarantee you there's polling out there. There's the people in the United States across almost every state support the idea of cannabis being legal.
Oh, most definitely, Brother Ian. I know the Democrats have wanted for federal for years. And the problem is big pharma.
So let's say they legalize pot.
66%, by the way, in favor of, this was in September of 2022, 66% of registered Pennsylvania voters are in favor of legalization of recreational marijuana, according to a CBS News poll. I mean, it was that easy to find it, dude.
Well, it looks like they can't.
I'm all for it.
Yeah, it looks like they don't actually own the government.
there might be a chance now that there actually is a Democratic legislature can be brought to the fore, and that's why I'm going to be making.
It didn't help in the United States. Like, there's been a Democratic legislature there, and they didn't do it.
Federally, yeah.
Jersey did it.
No, but federally.
Yeah, federally it didn't work.
So let's say that Pennsylvania.
There's an easy answer to that. The problem is the Republicans are knee deep in bed with Big Pharma, and the reality is recreational weed.
Have you been paying attention to what happened after COVID? Because the Democrats are also knee deep with Big Pharma. I don't know if you noticed that.
And the whole COVID shot's a mess as far as I'm concerned. I didn't take it, nor would I. You know, I got to say, Ricky, you are an interesting character because on one hand, you would wear the Confederate flag as a uniform. On the other hand, you support legal cannabis. You also think the Democrats are better off in charge. I mean, you're just full of all kinds of interesting distinctions. I'm an old school Democrat, Brother Ian, part of a dying breed.
Would you call yourself a blue dog Democrat?
A blue dog? That's a new term.
That's like the blue collar, right? Isn't that like the blue collar?
I've heard it, but I'm not sure what it meant. Old school.
Well, I haven't really heard of that. I'd probably be.
Come on.
I would probably be of the type of, say, a Kennedy or before, like that type. You know, that would be of that ilk, if you will. So then it's a dying breed.
I don't necessarily disagree with your politics there, Ricky. I'm just confused. Let's say
coughing to death
Pennsylvania legalizes pot, then what? That doesn't bring anyone that just allows people to smoke weed, right? I mean, that doesn't do any great, wondrous things for humanity.
Actually, I disagree because one thing weed will do is right off the top, it will greatly decrease the need for antidepressants. And more importantly, I'm an epileptic, and so my whole life I take Tegretol. If I smoke 3 medium bowls a day, I don't have to take Tegretol.
Are you chiefing on a pipe right now? Because you were coughing a lot earlier.
No, you know what it is? I think I caught bronchitis from somebody, my lady friend, who I rent a room from, left in the house yesterday. So I think I'm catching bronchitis, unfortunately.
The Blue Dog Democrats are a coalition of moderate House Democrats. So I guess I was wrong. They may not be blue collar. The group is dedicated to fiscally conservative legislation and a strong national defense. They present themselves as the quote-unquote common sense alternative to political extremism.
So they're Republicans, right?
Yeah, it's kind of weird. I didn't know that's what it meant.
That's generally what I hear a moderate is mostly. That moderates tend to lean more to the right than the left, it seems.
Well, when I hear strong national defense and fiscal conservatism, I don't think Democrats. I think, okay, that's a conservative.
Yeah, me either. I didn't know that.
Considering how Putin's doing over there in Russia, where he's got to get third-party mercenaries to be part of his army to beat the Ukrainians, I don't think we need to pay 90% of our defense budget to beat the Russians, you know?
I don't think we need to because it's none of our business.
So you're in favor of not subsidizing the Ukrainian military?
Well, I mean, I thought about this long and hard. Do I think Putin should be just allowed to run rampant over him? No. And we're not giving him anything that's really great. We're giving him surplus and stuff like that.
Aren't they sending M1 Abrams tanks over now?
They just came up with that now. It's a little late. Everything's destroyed. It's a little late in the game, isn't it?
I'm pretty sure they're sending M1 Abrams tanks to...
Yeah, they did.
That's some pretty serious equipment.
That's going to take a while. They got to be trained and all of that. It's going to take a long time.
Well, they're going to do it. Meanwhile, Putin is calling up 500,000 apparently reservists or draftees or whatever.
Well, he's been using third-party mercenaries. You got 3 different groups.
Okay, so are you in favor of sending American money over to Ukraine or not?
Answer, yes. And here's my reason why. Because they just can't fight against this guy.
So it's the U.S.'s job to back up anybody in the world who is having a conflict. We should get involved in all kinds of international conflicts. That's what you support. That's sort of the status quo.
I don't agree with that either, and this is a tough one because, like in the case of Israel, I've been disagreeing with that for years. Us picking the winner in that.
Israel,
you know, it's Israel.
So stay out of the Israeli conflict, but get into the Ukrainian one. Why?
It's a bad situation. I don't even know if I agree with myself on this.
All right, man. Well, hey, it's good to hear from you. Thanks for the call. I appreciate the different issues. I appreciate the discussion.
Absolutely.
Here tonight, Ricky. It's nice to hear from you. Glad to know you're all right. And thanks for the call tonight. Don't be a stranger.
We can all agree that we all hate Lincoln.
Oh, did he say he hated Lincoln?
He agreed that the states should have been allowed to secede.
True. That's a good point. All right, out of time for tonight. We'll see you tomorrow online in the meantime at freetalklive.com. On Free Talk Live, we're bringing people to the ideas of liberty every day. From wrestling superstars like Glenn Jacobs.
You guys really are having an impact, I believe. Like I said, a lot of where I am now is due to listening to Free Talk Live. You changed my mind on some very important issues years ago.
To random people tuning in on the radio.
I was kind of stuck in the left-right paradigm. I heard your show by chance on a Saturday night. From there, I went on, joined the Free State Project, and become an amplifier. So, I mean, that's really the reason why I amp is because I know that if it wasn't for you guys being on as many stations as you are, I never would have found the ideas of liberty.
You can help more people hear the message of liberty by joining Free Talk Live's AMPS program on Patreon for as little as $5 a month. And you'll get access to